Just waiting 1 second. I'm going to ask the clerk if there is a supplementary agenda for this evening.
Yeah, so I'll remind council that on Friday we sent out one additional report. It will be item 19E, school zone speed limits and community safety zones phase 1.
Deal with disclosure of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, or general nature thereof. The items before council tonight. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Yes, I have a conflict with 14A with a monetary issue.
Is there any further by council? Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 4 on the in-camera agenda.
Okay. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Agenda item 14A, as I own property in the area.
Any further? And seeing none, we'll deal with the first item on our agenda. Deals with the planning and to administration.
Planning meeting process. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1. The application will be announced by name of applicant, the type of application, the municipal file number, and its location. 2. The mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant or his or her agent with an interest in the application, and to indicate so by raising their hand. If there is no one present indicating the interest in the application, council will proceed as follows. 1. There will be no presentation by administration. 2. Administration will be asked if they wish to make additional comments regarding the report or recommendations. 3. Individuals or their agent present with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address council with their comments, concerns, or questions. 4. Council will be asked if it has any questions of each presenter. 5. The applicant will be asked if he or she has any comments. 6. Council will be asked if it has any questions of the applicant. 7. Administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. 8. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the application. Notice. If any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk of the corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Notice of passing. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website, www.chatham-kent.ca. All persons receiving notice of this meeting will receive a notice of the passing of a bylaw relating to any of the planning applications presented here tonight, if approved, including appeal procedure. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of passing or a notice of council's decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
Let's deal with the first item.
9A, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Esther and John Bordenuk, 10345 Eberts Line, Community of Chatham Township, North Kent.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss and seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Any comments or questions from council? Then seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I will turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
9B, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Dennis Sauvé Woodworking, Inc., 10th Line, Community of Raleigh, South Kent.
Is the applicant as or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to the application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Fluker, please.
Very pleased to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
It's been moved by Councillor Fluker and seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. Turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
9C, applications for consent and deeming bylaw, Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation of the Diocese of London and Ontario, 32 Canal Street West and 11 St. Clair Street, Community of Tilbury, West Kent.
Is the applicant as or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to the application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Herman.
I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Herman, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions? Then seeing none, I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. And I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next application.
9D, application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1042653 Ontario, Inc., 44 to 56 Leisure Line, Community of Dresden, North Kent.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is there anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss and seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none from council, I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll now turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next application.
Application for zoning bylaw amendment, Maple City Homes, Vitus Street, Community of Blenheim, South Kent.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to the application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Herman.
Pleased to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Herman, seconded by Councillor Vakudaran. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next application.
9F, applications for zoning bylaw amendment, AEY Industries Limited, 88 Grand Ave East, Community of Chatham City.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Myers.
I'll move the recommendations, Your Worship.
It's been moved by Councillor Myers, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would now ask council to consider the recommendation now brought before you. Now I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item on the applications.
9G, applications for zoning bylaw amendment and site plan control, Digger Wright Excavating, Inc., 23273 Prince Albert Road, Community of Chatham Township, North Kent. And it's been advised that the applicant has requested that this application be postponed to a future council meeting.
With the postponed, does that mean that the re-advertisement is going to occur?
That's correct. Just for if anybody is here watching on TV, if you got notice, you would have received a notice. We're going to have a public information session on Tuesday, July 31st here in the council chambers, just as an opportunity for people to get more information, understand what the applicant's plans are.
So there will be a public information on the 31st of July?
31st of July at 6:30 here in the council chamber.
And after that public information, subject to,
Subject to,
there'll be a
we'll-
re-notification going out to all residents in the affected area.
Exactly, Your Worship. We'll
Okay, thank you.
re-notify.
That concludes our planning portion of our meeting. And then we'll move to the regular council agenda. Here to get her done. Our first item on the regular agenda deals with deputations as of 3 o'clock, and I'll turn to the clerk.
Council, you were notified that there are 2 deputations that were received this evening. I will remind both speakers that there is a 5-minute limit. The first speaker is Rick Norris from the Community Future Development Corporation with regards to item 17B, the lease of 124 Thames Street, Chatham.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Just hit the button. There you go. There you are.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Hope, councilmen and women and guests. My name is Rick North, and I'm here tonight as chairman of Community Futures Development Corporation of Chatham, also known as CFDC. Accompanying me tonight are 2 other directors, Sean Buston and Lori Ripley. For those of you who are not familiar with CFDC, I'll give you a little bit of background on us. It was set up in 1986 by the federal government, and there are now 268 offices across Canada. The original purpose of the group was to give entrepreneurs access to funds that they could not get otherwise. We were basically a lender of last resort at that time, and this was mainly for new entrepreneurs that perhaps didn't have any assets, didn't have any business background, but it was an employment vehicle set up by the federal government. Locally, we have lent over $15 million, which has been invested in over 300 businesses, resulting in hundreds and probably thousands of jobs. One of the strengths of the CFDC is that although they are funded and monitored by the federal government, they are run and directed by a board of directors comprised of local business and professional men and women. And we make the decisions on all the loans that are given here. Every attempt is made to have representation from across the municipality, and our mandate has been to support local business and local economic development, much the same as your department here at the city. For the last several years, the concept of shared accommodations between CFDC and the Economic Development Department has been kicked around and talked about, but the timing never seemed to be right. But when the Grand Avenue facility was sold, and knowing that we had excess space, we thought the time would be now. Under the agreement, we both retain our separate identities. However, we'd enjoy the synergies of the close proximity to each other. This would result in a win-win-win situation. It's a win for economic development because now it creates a one-stop shop for their small business center. They can make their plans and bring them off to us to look at financing for them. It's a win for CFDC because there's someone else promoting our services and helping potential business people find us. But most importantly, it's a win for entrepreneurs looking to start businesses and create employment by offering a one-stop shop to help ensure that their plans and dreams can become a reality. Several other municipalities are using shared accommodations successfully. I know that Brant is using it. I know in Stratford, the Small Business Center is housed with CFDC, and there's several other ones in the province. As a businessman and taxpayer in this community, I've looked at this from almost every angle, and I do not see any downside. It's forward-thinking and should help economic development prosper. Tonight, you'll make many decisions. Hopefully, this will be one of the easier ones. I think it's the right thing to do. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much.
The second
Ask clerk for the next.
second deputation is Chris Stoll, Executive Board Member, and Bridget Buckingham, Head of Public Affairs and Policy from the SEIU Healthcare. Item 16A, Emergency Medical Services Staffing.
Welcome.
Your Worship, Council, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight. We're going to be brief. We fully support item 16 on the agenda, if it's passed. We ask that Council review the upstaffing in 3 and 6 months' time from now. And we also ask that the stakeholders, meaning the paramedics, be given a little bit of a say if we review this and find that there's a need for more upstaffing down the road. Thank you.
Your Worship, we just wanted to expand. I know the last council meeting, you would be noticing that there was the advertising campaign for Not in the Budget. And so this is just kind of building on that, and we're just expressing our support for the council to look at increasing the staffing amount, which obviously will have a budget increase that will be recommended to council. We think this is a great use of municipal resources, and so we just highly recommend that when the chief comes to present his proposal, that this is seriously considered by the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda deals with the consent agenda. Councilor Vercouteren, please.
I'll move the entire amount of the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Councilor Vercouteren, seconded by Councilor Van Dam. Any items of interest by Council? Councilor Solomon first.
Thank you, Your Worship. 11B1.
Okay. Councilor Thompson, please.
11A1.
Any furthers? Then those other items, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. I'm going to deal with the first one, 11A1. Councilor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much. I'm really thankful for this report. It's the culmination in a lot of hard work and a lot of public consultation. We had a really good meeting last Sunday at the Fire Hall in Erio with a stakeholders group. I did have a couple of questions, as there are some long-term recommendations and some short-term ones as well. I just wanted a little bit of clarification on. I suppose the question to Thomas Kelly would be just kind of lay out the timeline as to regards to when potentially council could be looking at this dike repair.
Tim R. Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Councillor Thompson, can you
define... Is it on, Tim? Sorry. Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. Sorry, okay. I'll speak up. Can you just define the timeline regarding...
Well, within the recommendations for the long term, there's conversations about removing the top 2.5 to 3 meters potentially of the of the dike. There's discussions in regarding to topographic surveys, working with higher levels of government. Basically, kind of what I'm curious about is we set aside money each and every year for a long-term, say, bridge repair. Is that potentially something we could start seeing in budgets in 19, 20, 21?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I would say yes, absolutely. The intent wasn't to assign timelines to this. The intent, I think, was to identify any immediate issues or any immediate action, and really to verify the actions that we've taken, not verify, but confirm that, you know, we've proceeded in the right direction, and what future direction would be appropriate should we choose to go there.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, and maybe you could expand upon it a little bit, for the rest of council who's maybe not as familiar with this work, this report really isn't the end of it. This is something that's going to remain on the radar.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you expand on that a little bit for me?
Well, as council, as certainly the area councilors are aware, we being infrastructure and engineering via drainage, via also, well, really, probably more directly, Public Works, continues to monitor and respond to the situations out there that we see with respect to either water coming over the rear, the properties facing the lake, or water that's encroaching upon the road or crossing the road. So I would say that our strategy would be that we would continue to monitor the situation, assess the condition of the banks and of the dike on the internal drain, being the Burke, and take appropriate actions if water is going over, or to direct water over if that be the case, wherever the situation, as we've done in the past, with the curbing and so on, to direct the water, and that was the purpose of the large barriers.
Okay. Now, the Golder report, I've had a chance to read it. I know Councillor Herman and Vercoutren have as well. Was that made available to the rest of council?
We did not circulate the report. The report is pretty technical in nature, so we summarized what we thought were, there's an executive summary in the report. We went through the entire report and provided a summary for council in the effort to simplify it, or in the effort to make it more less technical,
right.
Let's say that.
Okay, so really high level, since the rest of the councilors didn't get a chance to see it, what happens to the dike when it's been inundated for 3 or 4 days with water sitting on top of it?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, and the answer to that, it depends. And it depends on the condition of, and I'll admit right here now, I'm not a geotechnical expert either. So, but my understanding is that it would depend on a lot of conditions, like how long has the event been? You've said 3 or 4 days. But what were the pre-existing conditions? In other words, how wet was it before? How high is the existing water table in the area, for example? Those kind of conditions apply in just about every situation. No different than any drainage works. You know, we can handle 3 inches of rain in a lot of cases, maybe right now, but we might not be able to handle that in a very wet situation. So that's a difficult one to quantify. Within the report, it's identified potential critical areas within for a sustained week-long situation. I think that's what you're referring to. 3 to 8 days.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at, that the dike slopes become unstable during times of prolonged and significant flooding, i.e. at least 3 to 8 days, and then the recommendations are laid out there. Could you circulate that report to the rest of council for me? Yes, we can. Wonderful.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. That's all my questions.
Any further comments? Councillor Leclerc, please.
Through you to Tim. Tim, the report cost $16,000. I'm not 100% sure who petitioned it, and I think I got an email from Thomas how the costs were broke down, but the cost, the $16,000 cost, how is that borne? Like, you know, out in my world, the petitioner pays for it, so I'm not sure. If you could just answer that.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So let me be clear, there was no petition for this work. This work was initiated by Infrastructure and Engineering Services as an investigation to the dike and to the property that lies beneath the road and so on. I guess further to that, I didn't answer the whole question. It would be paid for out of the Infrastructure and Engineering Services budget.
Thank you. Councillor Herman, please.
Actually, I'm going to be very brief, and this is obviously a very passionate discussion we've had on all of these many meetings over the years on this road and Erie Shore Drive, and the residents, I have to say, first off, there's been ups and downs and bumps and bruises through this process and for everyone, and to them, I appreciate how they've rallied together and they've come together at the end here, this end of this term, to discuss with our staff, and together, hopefully the solution is step by step together and moving together towards the resolution of this challenge. For that too, I want to say thank you to our staff. I mean, the Sundays that you came out and met with us, as well as the residents of the community. Sometimes it's not said enough how much our staff do trying to mitigate a solution for the residents of Chatham-Kent, and I just want you all to know how hard our staff worked on this issue, and they really, I do applaud you and thank you all for that, and through you and your teams, Don Shropshire. And from there, I look forward to the future, continue monitoring. This is not an easy solution because it's a very, as we all know, very unique, whether it be the Drainage Act and people living on a drain, which is unique to all of Chatham-Kent. And this has not been an easy solution. So thank you again to the residents and to the staff. Thank you.
Further comments or questions from council? And seeing none, Councillor Thompson, a motion to receive for information, please.
I'd make that motion, yes.
It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Herman. All those in favor? Opposed, standing, and it's carried. Next item is 11B1. Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've had some questions through you to either Mr. Brown or Mr. Turner or both. So the public and other councilors know why I'm asking these questions. This report shows that there is, in simple terms, $700,000 less tax collected than anticipated when we did our budget, principally as a result of tax appeals, correct? Yes, okay. So what that number would normally do is add 0.5% to the budget, but your report says that as a result, there'll be no net municipal tax impact, that is in 2018 budget, as a result of the provision that we make every year for these kind of things. And I understand all that. My question is really, what impact, if any, does it have on the 2019 budget when we open up the first day? Are we $700,000 behind starting off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because that's budgeted every year, there'd be no impact on the 2019 budget.
Or any subsequent budget thereafter, correct?
That's correct.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions? And seeing none, a motion to receive. Councillor Solomon, please. It's been moved by Councillor Solomon, second by Councillor Vakuder, and all those in favor? Opposed, and it's carried. Our next item on the agenda deals with notice of motions. Councillor Thompson, please.
I, Councillor Trevor Thompson, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the August 13th, 2018 council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas increased congestion and ongoing safety issues on the 401 have pushed both local and far-reaching traffic to find permanent alternative routes, whereas local secondary roads are narrow and not engineered to withstand the increase in heavy truck traffic, and whereas no engine braking signs are ineffectual, unenforceable, and open up potential liability issues, therefore be it resolved that the speed limit on the 8th line at a distance of 800 meters in both directions from the Bloomfield intersection be reduced to 60 kilometers an hour.
Further notice of motions. Councillor Wesley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Jeff Wesley, here provide notice that I will bring the following motion at the August 13th, 2018 council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas the expropriation certificate dated 1984 for the floodway states that the dam can be operated in lands flooded for the purpose of alleviating flooding at the town of Wallaceburg, but not for any other purpose whatsoever. Whereas the current dam operations manual was developed in 1987 and updated in 1992. Whereas while the current operation of the dam has saved property damage and flooding in Wallaceburg, there still remain certain properties in Wallaceburg that continue to flood under the current operating criteria. Whereas the current operating procedure for the dam states that, due to the unpredictable nature of flooding circumstances, the elevations and data in this manual can only be used as a basic guide for the operation of the gates. The final decision may be a judgment call based on all data available and the circumstances at the time of the flood threat, which may not have been foreseeable at the time this manual was printed. And whereas in a review of all of the documents, there is nothing prohibiting a review and/or a revision of the operating criteria used for the closure and opening of the dam. Therefore, in 2019, the municipality of Chatham-Kent provide assistance, cooperation, and support in asking the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority to undertake a fulsome review of the operating criteria of the Darcy McHugh Floodway Dam. The purpose will be to update the operating criteria in the hope that flooding that is still occurring in the former town of Wallaceburg can be eliminated, all of which is respectfully submitted.
Councillor Caniff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Darren Caniff, hereby provide notice that I'll bring forward the following motion at the August 13, 2018 council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas the tiny home movement is the architectural, sustainable, and social movement that advocates living simply in small homes, while there's not yet a specific definition, a tiny home is generally considered a smartly designed small residential building, usually under 500 square feet, which can either be permanent or portable on wheels. The lack of available affordable housing continues to be an issue in most municipalities in Canada. Costs of materials, land, and construction continue to increase, pushing the cost of new home ownership even higher. Young adults entering the workforce and empty nesters leaving the workforce are facing costs that make home ownership difficult. The concept of tiny homes could expand available home ownership options and provide a practical and affordable solution for people in Chatham-Kent, where living space is not required to accommodate more than 1 or 2 people. Therefore, be resolved that administration further investigate the pros and cons of potential tiny home development in Chatham-Kent and report back to Council in the fall of 2018. As part of the review, administration considers such aspects as private sector interest, zoning, current building code restrictions, other applicable laws, and both mobile and fixed foundation options. Thank you.
Further notice of motions? And seeing none. First item on the agenda deals with tender awards, and let's deal with the first item.
Item 13A, tender award contract T18-192, Keir Avenue, McKinnon Drive, and Warwick Drive sewer separation. Community of Chatham.
Councillor Brock-McGregor, please.
I'll move the recommendations.
It's been seconded by Councillor Robertson. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 13B, tender award contract T18-243, Bloomfield Road Reconstruction, Community of Chatham.
Councillor Verkutteren, please.
I move it, Your Worship.
It's been moved by Councillor Verkutteren, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 14A, preliminary assessing bylaw for Baseline Road to Island View Road Waterline Project, Community of Wallaceburg.
Councillor Leclerc, please.
I'd be happy to move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Leclerc, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions from council? Councillor Leclerc.
Yeah, through you to somebody from the PUC. I don't know who I could ask. Is there anybody here?
Go ahead, try your best.
I noticed there is, I've been receiving more often than not questions about using our city water through the hydrants in the rural area to sub-irrigate some high-value crops. Water usage is fairly low. And what it does now, it expands the use of some of our farmland in Chatham-Kent to grow these high-value crops, whereas before we needed to be close to some drains closer to the lake. And I've had some issues with, water being available through our hydrants for this drip irrigation, I'll call it, for the high-value crops. My question with this report, Tim, would be, there was 2 or 3 vacant farms on this line. What if we approached them prior to this project and asked them if there's interest for this drip irrigation and if there was a need to upsize, which they would be responsible for? So is that something going forward, Tim? I'm not asking, I'm just that upsizing to accommodate the extra use of water to pay for the extra value of a crop, which wouldn't be detrimental to the use of water on the rest of the line. Is that something going forward that we could ask, or are you doing that already, Tim? Well, and I don't know if you heard the whole question or not.
Yeah, so basically I'll let Tim get in and then I can respond also. So it is a pilot initiative we're doing. This is around the irrigation of the crops. And Tim, if you want to expand a bit of what we've done today and where we're going.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, in respect to this Island View Road petition, it was asked those residents in that area if they had additional use other than residential, and no applications came back with additional water usage required. So the water line was designed and built around that usage that was required at the time of the petition. So no further upsizing has been taken place for future growth for the drip irrigation.
So on your second part is dealing with the irrigation of high value added crops. We have been over the last couple of years doing a pilot initiative. It's not a matter just because there's a fire hydrant in front of you. We will do a proper examination. Tim, if you mind explaining the process in which we go through in order and how we started off with a few fields and we've expanded it this year into higher amount. Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. We've piloted a drip irrigation pilot project, and we started with one field to see if it would work. The application at this point comes in. We have to do the modeling on that water line. Not everybody is available to have that drip irrigation because of location where they're at and the distribution system itself. We've expanded that over the 3 years from 1 field to now 5 fields. We've asked the pilot farmer that started this initiative to get different distribution systems involved. Unfortunately, this year we ended up having 5 requests in the same distribution system, which puts additional load on. But at this point, we're still managing even with the hot, dry weather that we've had so far. We're looking to expand that, but we wanted to get other distribution systems involved, like the Wheatley-Tilbury area, the Blenheim area, as well as the Wallaceburg area. So that's the initiative that's gone so far.
So Councillor Leclerc, this year we kind of ran behind the 8 ball on it, and next year when we look at it, we'll be reaching out to others because we need to test the other systems to make sure it is. It's a good way for us to make a little bit of money on our water that we're already treating. It also helps on the food safety standards because it's not being irrigated from creeks. That could be, we all knew about the E. coli breakout that happened in the U.S. That's not here, it happened in the U.S. But I think what we're trying to do is how do we add value to our agricultural community, utilizing the water lines that are currently there, but yet again making sure that the pressure, the PSI that is in the lines is in there to make sure that the residents are first priority, businesses are first priority, and then work with the agricultural community to get a return on the investment.
Thank you, Tim and Mayor Hope. And you know, the onus is also on the farm community, but I think this is so new. You know, we're all accustomed to, if you have a ditch, you know, we're gonna, if we don't, and hopefully we don't have to irrigate, but this is all new tech. It's not new technology, but it's a new use for our water. So, you know, I think the due diligence also falls onto the ag community. And, you know, and any further questions that I'm approached upon, I will direct them to you because, again, I understand. And, you know, and there is some concern, well, there's a fire, we need that hydrant, and some of the farmers are like, well, that's a dumb question, definitely shut me down. But again, because of legalities, you know, if it's not in paper, sometimes there's that concern. So going forward, I think there's taking a value of, you know, a $15,000 to $20,000 crop off a 50-acre parcel and turn that to a $250,000 to $300,000 parcel. You know, again, diversification in my industry, that's a good thing. If we can work with you, Tim, you know, and again, work with you, you know, that's what I've been telling a lot of people. They come to me frustrated and, well, they want to use this water tomorrow and they haven't done their due diligence. So, you know, I vent back to them too. I can do that now, but but I think this is a positive, Mayor Hope and Council going forward, you know, and we need bylaws put in place and terms, so be it. But I think it can expand the value added in our community and benefit many, many people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask Council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item, corporate services.
Item 15A, 2018 International Plowing Match and Rural Expo. This is our fourth update, Your Worship, and I believe Kathy Hoffman has a presentation to share with Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening's presentation will be shared between myself and Amy Wilcox. I'd like to share just a couple of things with you and then let the focus this evening be on the progress that we're making with the showcase tent, which, as you know, is the municipal portion of the promotion of Chatham-Kent as a community, in addition to the infrastructure and event support kinds of things that we're doing. So the very quick message for you, without repeating the entirety of the report, is to let you know we're very pleased that the municipal team is right on course with each of the functions and duties that have been assigned them relative to this event. That goes for both the assistants that have come from all of our departments, our engineering department, drainage department, our water group, you name it. Everyone is in and full board press ahead, as well as the progress on the showcase tent. I did include in here in the report a commentary that we are on course as well as it relates to budget, and I would just share with you a couple particulars. You may remember from our second report that essentially we broke our costs down into 3 areas: our in-kind tracking of staffing time for various work on the project, and then there was a section on the showcase tent itself, and then there was a piece related to what we would be invoicing the OPA by way of various services that we wouldn't be covering. So to let you know that we're continuing to track our staff time and our in-kind time, and we are certainly on course with that. When we get fuller into the project later on, I'll at the end come back with a full account of all of that. Our invoicing and so forth, we've been working with the OPA and their budget group to talk about those dollars, and while we've had the benefit of time, those costs have started to come down even ever so slightly now, with both additional sponsorships that have been fantastic come forward, as well as different volunteers who have volunteered their time, lessening some of the costs in some of the installation of certain areas. I would certainly use this as an opportunity to invite people in the community, if they haven't yet put up their hand and said that they would like to volunteer, that there are other areas in which we could have you volunteering for both the activities associated with the corporation of the municipality proper and others in the community. So please don't hesitate to contact one of our members if you have some interest in that. That helps us bring our costs down as well. We are continuing to sell tickets from our various municipal centers in addition to the other outlets that are available in Chatham-Kent for those, and happy to report that there's some great energy that is being expressed in the community, both about attending the event, plans to invite family and friends from outside of our community to attend, and tickets are already being purchased for that. So I think those are great signs of things to come. So last but not least then, I would invite Amy to come forward and give you a little presentation and give you a glimpse of what you can expect to see in our showcase tent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Council. So today marks 64 days to the International Plowing Match, which will be a 5-day event hosted in Pancor. We're expected to have over 100,000 visitors, span over 850 acres, have over 500 exhibitors, and have 8,000 students coming from all of the surrounding school boards. Being the host community provides a wonderful opportunity to be able to showcase to the residents of the IPM all of the unique and amazing locations and activities Chatham-Kent has to offer. Currently, our team has been working on the basis of having a creative team composed of people from our resident attraction and promotion area, our culture, and tourism sectors. Although they have been an amazing resource to us, I want to also include that Doug Robbins, who's our showcase tent coordinator, has been invaluable in this process. So what you can expect to be in the IPM tent, our objectives were to showcase Chatham-Kent as amazing places to visit, highlight the exceptional agricultural production of Chatham-Kent, promote economic opportunities that are available within CK, and illustrate our amazing quality of life. So our tent will have over 12,000 square feet. The layout of the tent is that it will be set out into 4 quadrants. First will be water, second is culture, the third is outdoors, and the fourth is food, or we grow for the world, where in the center we will also have a libation station. Each quadrant will have a 12x6 video screen. On those screens, we will be showing videos that are pertinent to each of those sectors. And as you can imagine, having those 4 screens, it requires over 45 hours of video, which is also a huge potential for us to be able to showcase to citizens all about Chatham-Kent. So our first quadrant, water, we will have an indoor beach installation, which is basically the screen will be highlighting videos for our various beaches, whether it's Rondo, Erio, Mitchell's Bay. We will have sand, and the videos will also highlight our water sports as well as angling, including a video from Bob and Wayne Azumi for those that are fishermen. You'll know those names. The next area is the cultural area. This will have a stage as well as videos where we will have local bands, spoken word, historical presentations, as well as video of our other amazing theaters, whether it's Capitol, Mary Webb, the Bothwell Theater. And this area will also have an indoor art installation. The next is the outdoor experience. In this area, we will be highlighting all our amazing trails, our outdoor sports, whether it's canoeing, kayaking, and also the viewing of our rare southern birds. This area will also have a water feature that'll help, excuse me, water feature that will allow people to then access the outdoor of the tent, which will have an accessible trail. And the final quadrant is food, or we grow for the world. In this area, we will have a farmer's market. The farmer's market will highlight all of the products that are produced in Chatham-Kent, whether it's Mr. Pickles or Mrs. D's. In addition, we are working with our local chefs who will use our Chatham-Kent produce to create samples for people to be able to try. In addition to the Rigor for the World of the food sector, I mentioned that we will have a libation station or a bar in the center of that tent, and in that area we will be having sample size of our local breweries and wine. Now, this is actually my most favorite part of the tent. I mentioned, both Kathy and I have mentioned this is the 101st IPM, so over 100 years that the IPM has been running. What we would like to do is to be able to bring that into the next century, and by doing that, we want to be able to showcase virtual reality. And what that basically means is we're going to be producing several 360-degree 3D videos of Chatham-Kent. So whether you're from Toronto or Timmins and you're in our tent, you'll be able to use our oculars and be able to experience whether it's North Buxton or Mitchell's Bay or Erio. In addition, I'm just going to pop this out. These videos, people will be able to download from their phones. So for those of you that have an iPhone, prior to today, I sent out to you the link to our sample of our 360 3D video. As you can see, if you move around, it can show. So you can imagine if you're from Toronto and you've never had an opportunity to visit Uncle Tom's Cabin, from your home, and when you go back, you can download these. And what's great is it has that future life use, is where we will have this on our municipal YouTube channel. And people can download these and experience what Uncle Thomas is without actually coming here. Or hopefully they can experience what Mitchell's Bay, Erio, Rondo is, and then come down to experience it. So as you can see, I've been moving this around. If you click the little icon, for those of you on at home, you won't be able to see this, but the screen will split and produce it in 3D. So we will have these goggles that will be given out to people who are participating, and they'll be able to view this when they go home and take that back with them. So on the screen right now are 3D renderings of what we expect the tent to look like. As you can see, we talked about the 4 quadrants with the bar in the center. Along the outside, you might remember, for those of you who are new to council this year, or this term, back in 2010, Chatham-Kent was awarded Boardwalk on the Monopoly. So to help tie in English and French, as well as to have a nod to us being Boardwalk. On the outside of the tent, we will be mimicking a part of the Monopoly board. We'll be working with local artists who will be creating Mr. Monopoly or Mr. Moneybags, in addition to some of our everyone's most favorite tokens, whether it's the dog or the top hat or the race car, that will actually be able to be movable around the board. In addition, we'll be working with people to create hotels and houses that you remember from the beloved game, and some of those will actually be represented by a model of whether it's Retro Suites or the J.D. Bradley Convention Center will be there as well. So this is an overview where you will see the different quadrants. And just to the right of the bar, you see some stand-up tables. And what those are, it's just an example of the partnership that we've already attained with some of the people we've been working with. Some of you might know Kerner, who creates ground screws here in Chatham-Kent. So, they create screws of all different sizes. They're currently creating the screws that'll be used at the largest solar panel farm in Dubai. They're going to be creating these very large screws and then partnering with Oak Barrel. This company is the people who will be creating our farmers market as well as our bar. They will be creating the tops with their logo. So just a great example of the different businesses that are working together. So last month we had some information sessions to let people know what our showcase tent was going to look like, what our objectives are. And that to let people know that we're looking for people. If you are in a local band, you do spoken word, you're a performer, cultural dances. In addition, if you make anything, so Mrs. D's, you make preserves, Parks blueberries. There's just a list. I could be here all night. We want to make sure that you're represented in our tent. So for those of you who, this is a little plug, if you're looking at how to get a hold of us, great way is either to call the municipal number 519-360-1998 or email ckpartnership@chatham-kent.ca. And this last screen just shows just a few of the amazing partnerships we've already developed with our showcase tent. Without them, this tent wouldn't be possible. So thank you.
Turn the floor. Any comments or questions? Councilor Wesley, please.
Thank you. That was very impressive, Amy. And what I saw up there was we're really highlighting the products that are grown in Chatham-Kent. But what about unique products that are made in Chatham-Kent? Where is there a place for those, or is there?
That's what we're hoping with the partnerships. That's why we wanted to be sure to talk about that example with Kerner with their ground screws. We had another company here that I think you would be familiar with, Councillor Wesley. Yeah. There was a company that came and met us at one of the information sessions who's the only producer of safety hats in Canada that goes all over North America. So we'd love to be able to incorporate that in a fun, informative way as well. So we try our best. We're working with economic development. We're working with a lot of other partners to be able to ensure we're not missing anybody. But again, if anybody knows of someone, please reach out to us.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with that company, but I also had some questions from some local business people who had unique products that they were thinking maybe could be showcased as well. Not grown products, but, you know, kind of manufactured clothing and things of that nature. So, yeah, keep an open mind, because there's a whole market out there, I think, that would do a great job of showcasing Chatham-Kent as well.
I appreciate that, Councillor. As we said, one of our objectives is to be able to highlight the economic opportunities in Chatham-Kent. So if anybody knows of someone, to either have them reach out to myself or to our Economic Development Department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Solomon, please.
I didn't have a comment.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Councillor Oche, please.
Thank you, Mayor. To you, Amy, I know you did say fisheries, or fishing. Is that including the fisheries in Erie O and Wheatley? Will they be in the big tent?
With regards to the videos, we would be showing some fishing charters. In addition, like I said, we have 45 hours a day for the 4 videos, video screens. So we are hoping to reach out to everyone that has any unique materials, collaterals, pamphlets. If you're a tourist location, we want to be able to include that as well. So we will be reaching out with the fisheries to see if they want to be involved. In addition, they have fish products, so we could be making some amazing samples for visitors to CK.
Just because we do have the largest freshwater fishing.
Correct, we
ground,
do.
so I just want to make sure that that is going to be in there. Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Gooderham, please.
Just want to make a comment. I'm very impressed with the way you're doing this. I think it's going to draw a lot of people. These things were not available when we had the plowing match in '79. I've been to a lot of them, probably 15 or 18 of them already. Between you and me, the biggest problem you'll have is accommodations. I see coming, because we had it over there. We had problems over there to have accommodations, you know. But maybe you're prepared for that, I don't know. And that's one thing you have to really watch. But I'm quite impressed the way you're going at it. I think it's going to be really attraction, you know, the building that you're putting up. And for the rest, the people that have something there, they'll all put up something similar to that. I'm sure of it. So, so the only thing I do worry about is the weather. Thanks.
I don't have control over that. Kathy?
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Vercouteren, to your subject about accommodations and so forth, certainly this is something as well that our co-chairs, Councillor Leclerc and Caniff, can speak to, but there is a subcommittee that's a part of the overall event that deals with the accommodations in the RV park, and they have an active committee out selling that prospect of it as well as what we have available for accommodations for people to stay. Thank you.
Further comments or questions on the report? Just one question I got. You made reference, Kathy, to in-kind OPA bill invoicing, just so that somebody says, well, I didn't know that. What is the budget number that you were looking at?
Your Worship, the in-kind costs, we had forecasted the in-kind costs, again, being staff time working on the various components, was an estimate of about $550,000. So we are tracking that number on a weekly basis. So at the end of the actual event, we'll be able to tell you how much time by way of a cost of staff time was accounted for. We, in the second report, itemized about $137,000 of costs that would be out-of-pocket expenses for the municipality, for which we would be invoicing the OPA as event costs, and that is something, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of doing. And then the showcase tent, Council approved a budget of $200,000 for the expense of the showcase tent, and for which to date we have spent about $67,000 in our planning, and we certainly won't be going over $200,000.
Okay. That it? Don?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one important point, I think, with that $67,000 investment, I was really impressed with the number of things that you built into the showcase tent that have legs that will extend well beyond the IPM. I think it's going to showcase what we have to offer, and it's a fabulous piece, but that video piece, the other things that you've identified, we'll be able to use that for months or years afterwards, and I think it's just that's a really smart investment. It compliments to the team for the way you've actually pulled that together and highlighting, some of the greatest stuff we have to offer in CK, so thank you for that.
See no further comments. A motion to receive for information. So moved by Councillor Foss, seconder, Councillor Oche. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Next item on the agenda deals with community development. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 16A, Emergency Medical Services Staffing. Your Worship, we have a presentation by Chief Case and Donald McClellan, our General Manager from Medivy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, as you can see, I'm joined by Don McClelland, General Manager for Medivy EMS, who runs our paramedic service here in Chatham-Kent. It's testimony to our continued and developing partnership approach that we both stand in front of Council this evening to present this proposal to you and to answer your questions. In the last round of budget deliberations, Chief Crawford made a successful ask for an additional ambulance unit. This was to fill a gap highlighted by our service partner that sometimes whilst an ambulance is operating, a fresh crew coming on duty may be available to begin running calls, and that's what the ambulance has been used for to date. During these deliberations, we gave an assurance that we would continue to monitor calls for service with EMS and take a longitudinal view to bring a recommendation back to Council on further staffing options. There's a constant level of dialogue between Fire Administration and the EMS management team. As you can see, they're all sat together in the corner over there. In addition, as an on-call chief, I see the first-hand work our paramedics do alongside fire and police colleagues every day. Whilst I only see a small part of the work, I'm confident that their dedication is a credit to every member of our community. Since becoming the partner service for EMS services in 2012, Medivy and the municipality have developed and implemented a range of alternate service provisions to assist our communities and to try and reduce the demand on paramedic response. Examples include to our deployment plan, which has changed twice in the last 5 years, referring non-urgent patients to home and community care services, and the implementation of a groundbreaking community paramedic program to aid in managing patients' care needs within the home. These are just some of the aspects that we've worked collaboratively on to try and reduce the burden. But since 2012, demand for paramedic services has grown at a rate higher than the population growth rate. This increase in demand is likely to continue to grow as the annual demand for service increases by an average of 3.2% year upon year. We continue to see people taking advantage of an enticing combination of a low cost of living and a wonderful environment by selling their homes and moving to Chatham-Kent. I, for one, am testimony to this. In the 2016 census, we saw a 15.6% increase in citizens over the age of 65, with the age group of 50 plus accounting for over 70% of calls for service to our paramedic colleagues. Our paramedic service have continually provided us with information and recommendations how to alleviate some of the service pressures, hence us both standing in front of you this evening. The recommendation provided in the report to provide an additional 12-hour shift from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 2 o'clock in the morning each day has been considered after this dialogue. And I'd now invite Mr. McClellan to come forward and provide some more insight into the trends that we see in Chatham-Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Case, Mayor Hope, members of council. Thank you as well for having me stand up here tonight and co-present with Assistant Chief Case. It is a bit of a testament to our ongoing improvement of our relationship and our commitment to the product we deliver in the community. A main focus of what I'll show you in the next few slides is the trends and the major trends in our system that have grown year over year since 2012, since we've took over the contract to manage EMS delivery here. The way I've broken down this slide is that we break it down in the categories of requests that we receive. So we have a range of emergency calls, which are the critical, life-threatening requests when dispatched. So that's the green column. Our red column is our lower acuity, lesser acute and severe calls in the red. And then our transfers in between hospital facilities is the blue. So as you can see, back to Chris's comments, we've done an annual increase year over year for emergency calls of about 3.2%. Our lesser acuity calls have fluctuated, but have also grown over time. We feel that they've plateaued a little bit, and we think that's a contribution to a few different things in the community. The healthcare landscape has changed quite a bit over the last few years in Chatham-Kent, where there's more commitment to delivery of services within the home. The community paramedic program is an example of that, and there are many others that we are partnering with. But that demand does still grow year over year at a rate of about 2.5%. And our interfacility transfers between hospitals have decreased. However, as you can see, our resources are being reallocated within the year to our other higher demand calls. Code Zero is a term that we use within our operation that identifies when we get to 3 or less ambulance transport units within Chatham-Kent. This is when we start getting down to limited resourcing to be able to balance our coverage with the municipality, and then in turn increase our overall responses to demand within the community during this time phase. So again, much like our call demand, this operational status has increased significantly year over year, and then as an overall 5-year window, we've gone up about 255% of having this status. And then when you break it down on a daily average of how often we're in this status, again, you look at 2012, we were about a 25-minute time frame. To the most recent in 2017, an hour and a half has been the daily average of that status. So that brings me to the end of that portion of showing the demand and the increase of service requirements to our staff on a daily and annual basis. Certainly open for any questions.
Thank you. I'll bring the lights up. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a chance to talk to the 2 chiefs earlier today, and my concern is that we're putting another ambulance into service. I guess I look at North Kent being one of the largest geographical wards in the whole municipality, and we have no ambulance station in North Kent. I'm asking that if it isn't already done, that a review be done as to where you position these ambulance stations so that there's a better spread of geographical servicing of ambulances.
Thank you, Councillor. It's fair to say, as you can see from the analysis, that this is a constant discussion that we have. We review this on a daily, a weekly and a monthly basis. But based upon your comments tonight, we'll certainly go away and we'll take another look at that. And I can assure you the geographical location of units is something that we consider quite regularly.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple comments. Code Zero, when we have, through you, Mayor Hope, to the speakers, Code Zero, we still have 3 trucks. However, what creates a Code Zero? What are the circumstances that could lead up to that?
Through you, Mayor Hope. A multitude of factors can play in that state. The biggest factor would be the call demand, so the number of calls that are coming in that time frame. I'll use the hour window as example. If we get 5 requests for service during the peak time of our day, that would then bring us down to a 3-unit level availability. But it can change throughout the day. We may have a unit gone on a transfer to London, or there might be an incident, much like we had several weeks ago in the Dresden-Thamesville area, where we had a mass casualty incident that required numerous resources, not just from our service, but from our neighboring services to assist in that response.
Okay, second comment, in my business, I deal with perishable goods in a different way, but, I need to harvest, get them delivered to a place of business to offload. And if we wait or we're held up at our factory, well, sometimes we think the mentality is I buy more trucks, but I'm gonna wait. So what I'm hearing a little bit in the community, we have our staff attending the hospital to offload their perishable, and there's a wait. So my concern is, are we to hire 1, 2, 3 more trucks, staff them for them to sit in a parking lot, which is, and this is just my concern, and I've been fed this a little bit, is where does it stop? Do we build a bigger parking lot, for example, to park everything? So that's my concern. Like, have we gone to the hospitals and said, this is a cost to us because of you, and they're going to blow us off. But again, that's one of my concerns. When do we stop? We buy more trucks and we leave them in the hospital, and that's not the only issue here, but I'm just, explaining my point on that part. So I don't know if you could answer that, and then that'll be all I have.
Through you, Mayor Hope, another element that can contribute to limited resourcing on a daily basis is the offload delay status. That has become, a growing trend that we are now working very closely with the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance on currently. Actually, we met as late as last week on this topic, where we're looking at finding solutions and collaborative efforts to alleviate how often that happens. There is a risk because, it's a trickle effect. They're busy, and in turn we are probably busy as well. But definitely a joint effort currently to find solutions to mitigate that on an ongoing basis. So.
Councillor Pinsino, followed by Councillor Verkutteren.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe it's inevitable that we do have to add to our EMS service. We get reports here at the council level, and we've been under stress for a long time. We're an aging community. There's other variables, as Councillor Leclerc was speaking of, and it just puts a lot of stress on the system. Probably the time to do this would have been when we were in contract discussions. However, we had a bigger decision to make at that time, which I believe we made the right one, and that this is part of it. I don't like to add money to our budget, nor does anybody else here, but I think this is going to be a necessity. I'm happy to see that EMS and fire have a good working relationship again. That was stressed for a little while as well. And now we're moving forward. I think the time slot you're suggesting, the afternoon till 2 in the morning, I think that's perfect too, because I think that's your high volume time of day. I was at that accident you were talking about, and I'll tell you, Deputy Casey did a great job of orchestrating neighboring EMS units out there and our own EMS units. And when you have 10 people to go in a short time, and we had some seriously injured, that was orchestrated pretty good. But that's just another stress that gets put on the system. Those don't happen all the time, but when they do, it's nice to know that it can be facilitated. This is needed in our community, I believe, and I'm going to support it. Thanks.
Councillor Verkutteren, followed by Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Some of my questions have been answered. I guess I've been calling you quite a few about different things. Anyway, the question I'm getting in my area is that they want to know what is the response time that you goal your job to? Like, what is your response time to a call? Is there a set fee or set amount that you try to work for, or you?
Through you, Mayor Hope, the Ministry of Health requires each respective municipality that either directly provides EMS service or contracts out to set a response time performance plan based on CTAS level. So what CTAS level is the acuity score that's given to a patient based on their ailment. So an example, CTAS 1 is the most severe acute illness in that given time, i.e. an example is a cardiac arrest, all the way down to a CTAS 5, which is a minor ailment. So each category has its set performance time and the percentage target that is forecasted to achieve. And that is, as you can recall, back in May of 2017, that plan was presented to Council to approve to set as the response time plan. So That's the plan that's presented to the ministry and what we use as our benchmark to strive to achieve.
Yeah. I will say this, Don, it's a lot better in my area. I'm not getting the calls like I did before. And the vehicle seems to be there a lot more now than they were at one time. I guess you were working Ridgetown back and forth, I think, with Blenheim. We, in the budget, Your Worship, we ordered a new ambulance. What's happening in that? Are you working that ambulance in with our group, are you working this ambulance in with our system now, or is it mobile?
So the business case for the new ambulance was that, as Mr. McClellan's described, sometimes there may be an offload delay, or sometimes where a crew might be going off duty and they're delayed out in the field. A new crew arrive at the station. Rather than sit there and not be able to go anywhere, they can then get into this ambulance and go out and service calls. So at the moment, that's what that new ambulance is engaged with.
Okay. I'm going to leave it there because I'm quite happy the way you've changed a lot of things, and it's working a lot better for us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Carmen McGregor, followed by Councillor Oche.
Thank you, and through the mayor, just wondering if you could flip back to the other chart. Yes, this one here. So, wish I could see it well. Okay, I was just looking in the comparison to the 212 to the 217, and from the code zeros from 25 minutes up to an hour and a half. Back in 212, did we have the same reciprocal agreement within our extending communities for our ambulance services to go out? And are we in a code zero a lot of time due to the fact that we're leaving our municipality on a regular basis?
Through you, Mayor Hope. The cross-border or mutual aid agreements have been the same for quite some time, actually before our time here in Chatham-Kent. That is a factor that can contribute to us having a code zero status, is that we've responded into Lake Shore or north of Wallaceburg into Lambton County if we are deemed the closest resource. So as for actuals and specifics, I don't have that in front of me, but I certainly know that at times that is a contributing factor to the status that we would go into, such as this.
Okay, then my next question would be, has due to cutbacks in hospital and such, I know when you take a patient to the hospital, you have to remain with that patient at the hospital for a period of time till they've taken over, so which ties that ambulance up. Has that increased greatly just because of cutbacks due to, and I guess due to the need to have somebody there because there's not somebody taking over faster at the hospital? I fully agree with what you're doing. I'm just trying to decide, do we actually have that many more cases locally that we cover, or is it due to other, say, downloading from other local areas that we're now picking up on, that now we need to pay for the difference that we weren't paying in the past, because in other situations, like to me, it looks like it might be by the stats and these charts that it might be more of a downloading situation into our system. I agree we need the service, and I fully agree with the report. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the changes in 5 years.
So through you, Mayor, I hope the cross-border, I'll call it sharing of resources, for the most part, are fairly equal. They fluctuate day to day or month to month, but for the most part, us going in and them come and the other municipalities coming into our area to service calls is relatively the same. There might be times where the difference does vary a bit, but we work closely with our partners in the respective EMS services in the counties that surround us. So back to your original question, I believe, with
is the time spent at the hospitals, is some of that increasing the time that we have an ambulance off the road and out of service?
So we are seeing, as of recently, an increase in that effect and status at hospitals. And you are correct. We have to remain with the patient to provide continuity of care until we can officially verbally hand over a report to the receiving nurse or physician. Again, it's a new trend more than it's ever been, and we are working very closely with the hospital leadership, and they're trying to attest it to what are the factors And, I can't answer the question about the nursing level impact, but certainly I know they are evaluating this to its entirety to ensure that they're understanding the where and why, and then we can come up with a solution to move forward.
Like I understand, like when we have an aging committee, and that might increase some of our calls, but I find it hard to believe that's totally the reason for our increases. And so I just look at it, and I'm just trying to figure out the numbers. The only other thing I was wondering about when reading it, has provincial standards changed as to what is considered a critical call? Like, have they changed the levels of standards for when somebody calls in and is requesting an ambulance?
Through Mayor Hope, no, that criteria has not changed. However, that being said, the ministry and the communication centers are currently going through some future projects to change how they do interrogate those 911 calls and requests for service, which could in turn, change the priority of it or change maybe in future alternate pathways to provide care. So there are some changes in legislation of the Ambulance Act that are coming into play in the next several years that will hopefully have an impact to help us better utilize our resources in a more strategic fashion.
Thank you for being able to answer my questions.
Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Through you, Your Worship. What ambulance will we be using for this? The reason I'm asking you, it seemed like when I brought this up at budget time, we didn't have an ambulance that we could use, and now we have an ambulance that we can use. So is this going to be the one that works normally has the shift till 2 o'clock, and then we're going to put it back out on the road with the new shift? Is that what we're using here?
Through you, Mayor Hope. As you can imagine, it's difficult to say which ambulance will do which. There's a fleet of ambulances.
I'm sorry, I'll clarify that, sorry. I know we have 2 or 3 standbys. Mm-hmm. We couldn't use those every day, they said, because they just weren't worth it. So I guess what I'm saying is we won't be using one of those, but we won't be using the brand new one either, right? Because that's only to cover when a new shift comes on. Then the old shift goes off, that ambulance goes back. I'm assuming we're going to use one of those, not one of the standby ones. Is that correct? Because for some reason we couldn't do it before.
I say it's quite difficult to actually say which ambulance will be used by which crew at any one time. So we do have some reserve ambulances in the fleet, and the new ambulance was asked with this in mind, because at the time we did say we'd take a longitudinal view of staffing, but it gave us a bit of alleviation. New ambulances are being delivered at the end of September, I believe. And from that, we'll ratify the fleet and ensure that we have everything covered.
Okay, because that's another thing, because I mentioned use one of the new ambulances, and it didn't seem like it could be done, but anyways, it's being done, or hopefully going to be done after today. And I would be more than, I guess I'm not extremely happy to be bringing this forward now, but I would move this motion now if I could do that.
More than happy to move it now if you want.
I'll do that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Bondi. Any further comments, Councillor Oche?
Other than I wish it was done in budget, but I know we need it done, so let's get it done.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Just a quick question, gentlemen. When was the last time there was an increase to service? Well, that's a good answer. Maybe a long time, I guess.
Councillor Bondi, an excellent question. We'll get back to you with an answer. The
So
fact that we're both looking at each other and...
So pre-Medivy, obviously?
Yes.
Okay, well, so quite a while, so this isn't a
2012
thing...
at least.
Pardon?
2012 at least. Because you... So
Right.
We can get you a definite answer, but not
Okay,
not to
but a
our
long
knowledge.
time, so...
Yes.
Okay, no, that's great. That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fluker, followed by Councillor Myers.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Actually, my hand was up to do exactly what Councillor Oche did, which was to move this. To me, not being trivial, it's a no-brainer. When I read the report this weekend, the writer of the report was absolutely right. We have an aging population that has all kinds of illness. We have the same issues. Councillor Oche and I have 2 communities of 5,000. One of them does not have an ambulance. They get ambulance service from either Tilbury or Leamington. and we are on the border. And so my comments will be certainly very short. It is a no-brainer. I had to smile. There are people in this audience that remembers how much ambulance service and paramedic service has improved. 50 years ago, it used to be the local hearse that hauled you into the hospital. And his efforts didn't have anything to do with first aid. He was just looking for business. But that's my comment, and I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, you can remember when the hearse was the ambulance. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember who the mayor was, but I know the next one. Councillor Myers, followed by Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going to the report itself and the two recommendations, either Don or Chris, the 12-hour service that's coming out of the ambulance reserve, that 312,000, that's for the balance of this year, 2018. If I read the report correctly, it's that's for 5 months, correct?
Yes.
Starting actually, logistically, August 1st?
It'll be around August or September we're looking at. So it's a decision we'd have to make depending on the audit. We didn't want to preempt it by the decision tonight. So
you're not necessarily having to wait for the new ambulance to come on board yet?
We can work out the details, but we could use one of the ambulances from the fleet. So.
Okay, all right. And the 12-hour, to provide the 12-hour service, that's new staffing, correct?
Yes.
That wouldn't be existing staff working overtime?
That would be additional staffing.
New staffing. I think I understand number 2 okay. The increase in the amount for 2019 would simply be the additional 12 hours for the whole 12 months. And then after that, it only increases by the rate of the inflation for the actual cost.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, I'm reading it correctly. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you very much. I think this is something that's long overdue. Adding the 12 hours of service, I think, is a prudent first step, but that's kind of where my question's leading to. What are the next steps after this that we see coming down the road?
Well, Councillor, if I had a crystal ball, my job would be a lot easier, I have to say. We continue to ascertain the service, through you, Mayor Help. We continue to look at the service, we continue to look at the calls, we continue to look at the trends, and whether this will be enough for the next 2 to 3 years, I honestly cannot tell you. I don't think anybody can.
Okay. I think this is the right thing to do, especially not only for an aging population, but also for families looking to move to the area. They wonder about young kids and all the injuries that children get. I'm going to have another crystal ball question for you because I didn't see it in the report. Any idea how much this 12 hours of service would alleviate the statistics you put up in front of us?
Give me 1 second, I gotta look at some notes here. When we look at the time pattern of the proposed times, sorry, through Mayor Hope, that time volume or that sort of time frame aligns with about 55% of our call volume. So again, standing up here tonight predicting what that impact will be, it's hard to say. Hence why a rigorous evaluation needs to be conducted once a change is made in operations, especially around deployment. And I think it's only wise for us to provide that information back to administration to look at the impact that this potential investment may make in the community, as well as our paramedics and obviously over the overall response to the community. So to answer your question, an evaluation needs to be conducted to see what the benefits have been and what the sort of ongoing risks may still be there, if any.
And you will be doing that evaluation then?
Correct. That's part of our regular business plan. Anytime we make a change, we evaluate that change to understand the impacts and then to understand the opportunities we need for improvements moving forward.
So how long does that evaluation take? When would you expect to have something like this back to council again, just giving the update of how much of an impact the change did have?
So, sorry, through you, Mayor Hope, in EMS, the sort of minimal amount of time it takes to truly evaluate system impacts is about 40 weeks. So what we would do at that point is the minute we would sort of start the clock on if this is to be passed, when this enhancement would start, we would start doing a forecast now. That being said, if less than 40 weeks we're seeing some drastic concerns that need addressing, then we would certainly have that conversation with administration to look at revisions at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to supporting it.
Councillor Soman, please, followed by Councillor Caniff.
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions come from a little different angle, and I want to understand the big picture of this. So my first question is really to Mr. Turner. We're being asked, I realize in 2018, the money will come out of a ambulance reserve account, correct?
Through you, Mayor Hope, yes, that's correct.
But after that, in 2019, if we can use 700,000 as a round figure, that will be the addition to budget in 2019.
That's correct. We're intending to put that into the base budget.
Right. So tell me, when we do budget, we often talk about dollar amounts as a percent increase. So what does $700,000 represent as a percent increase in the budget?
It'll be a little under 0.5%.
Somewhere around 0.5%. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. In your presentation tonight and in the report, it seems the justification for this expenditure of 0.5% on the budget, in base budget, meaning it goes on forever, is based on reduction. This amount of money, if invested, so I'm looking at it as an investment, is to reduce the code zero amounts that you show on your earlier chart. Because it doesn't really have anything to do with the other ones, because they've plateaued in your chart. And in fact, the lesser code area has actually dropped. Right. So this is all about code zero incidents, right? I mean, that's the justification, is all about code zero.
Through you, Mayor Hope, a big part of this is through the operational impact that limited resources creates. At certain times of the day, you are correct. You are bang on in the fact that we can't overall change the calls for requests. They're still going to come in no matter how many resources are on the road.
Right.
I think a big part of that is us finding innovative solutions with our partners in the community to try and help serve clients in a more unique fashion, whether it be through our community paramedic program or other opportunities to provide care at home so clients don't need to pick up the phone and call 911. The other piece too is, the staff impact. We're trying to alleviate or decrease the impact on staff, whether it's the kilometers driven, opportunities for, justified breaks during shift, and other opportunities that impact on their well-being as well as the care that they can provide the patients.
But that's not what you've shown us tonight for justification. It's
Correct.
code zero.
Correct.
Right? Okay, so if a counselor, or let me do it the other way. When a counselor in 2020 sitting around this horseshoe brings a motion that says, okay, I'd now like to see how our $700,000 investment, what the return on the investment has been, right? So what I'm suggesting is, for the $700,000 investment, we should see an improvement in the code zero incidents increasing. In fact, we should see that line either flattening or moving in the other, not increasing anymore.
Through Mayor Hope, correct. That's what we're trying to
Yeah.
hopefully achieve. What that number looks like, we don't know.
No, I'm
Yeah.
sure you don't, but when we invest money, taxpayers' hard-earned money, counselors are supposed to say, okay, show me the success of the investment, right? And that's all I'm asking. I'm going to support. I don't need to hear a long explanation, and you're not going to convince me to support it or not support it on the basis of simply the dollars. But I want to know that this is a real good investment of taxpayers' dollars because it's 0.5% on the budget. So I'm going to support it. Because I'm going to hope that in 2020, give you enough time, not just 2019, that we'll see that the problem that you've shown us tonight is actually improved because we've invested the $700,000. We can't just throw money at problems. We need to know that there's a return on it. That's the first thing. Second is I have a problem with this procedurally, not because it isn't a good thing to do. I think we should have done it in the budget in 2018 so that we'd know what the expenditure was all of 2018, and if we needed to cut other things because this took a priority, we would have done it instead of adding 0.5% next time. Right off the bat, as Mr. Turner says, we're going to start off 0.5% behind the 8 ball. Should have done it in 2018, and it would have been better to have that report early or have it in the budget so that we could have done that, cut back other things that might have been nice to haves. Not your fault, Chris. You weren't. I don't think you were in this role at that point in time. But I need to make that comment because that's the way we should have done it. Finally, you know, the justification of it seems to be the right route to go. I think hopefully you're going to come up with a solution. The other reason I'm going to support it is I hope that it's a good investment for the community. I hope we're going to get the return, and if I'm here, I'm going to monitor it and make sure that we do get the return. But the other issue that's been raised is stations and, you know, whether ambulances are going to be fixed in a place. As I've understood what we've been told by Chief Crawford from day one, and I think his predecessor, these ambulances are on the move all the time. And I remember getting a report some time ago that said the majority of the incidents that you respond to are where the majority of the population is, plus the 401. Am I correct in that?
Through you, Mayor Hope. I'm just checking with Mr.
It's pretty logical that that's it.
That there is that corridor down Highway 40 and
Right.
the 401, yes.
401. And then aside from that, the majority of your calls occur where the majority of the population is. I guess
correct.
that's just, as someone said, a
That's what you would
no-brainer.
expect. Yes.
Okay. So where they're actually located, the ambulances, stationed in a building, I took from Chief Crawford's comments is really not particularly relevant because they're on the move constantly.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Good. Well, I'm going to support it for those various reasons because it is these ambulances are on the move. They will affect the high majority population areas, and they also, you've got a couple of years to see that it works out, and it's a good investment for the community.
Thank you, sir.
Still say we should have done it in 2018, and therefore we wouldn't have had a 0.5% increase next year. We would have made some accommodations.
Mr. Case, I think there was one question in there. I know the process you did and you could not answer, but there was a process that I think Councillor Solomon was asking about was the evaluation of the investment. That is, how are you going to determine that? So in 2020, that's what I got out of all of that. In 2020, how are you going to?
I'm obliged, Mayor Hope. As you see, the reason why we've got to this position now is because there's a continual assessment. We can tell you this is our best prediction given to you today based upon the numbers that we are seeing. I would love to stand here and say you will definitely get a response from this. You will get a positive response. But then again, that depends upon call volumes and a whole host of factors that we cannot control.
Well, thank you for that response, but the reason I asked those questions and did it in such detail, and I'm sure the mayor really understood it all, was because we're making an investment. We ask other departments to show us the return on the investment. It only makes sense that we'll ask you to show us the return on investment when you base your argument on the numbers that you gave us.
And when you look at the other, through you, Mayor Hope, when you look at the other factors such as the community paramedicine program, when you look at the other factors that Medivir are using, we hope the combination will see the return that you wish to see.
Excellent. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Caniff, was that a stand down?
Yes, Your Worship. With all the questions asked, mine have been answered. So thanks.
Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. And I'm glad to hear Assistant Chief Case mention the ongoing assessment. And I would assume that's what we all expect is going on all the time, and that's how we got here. And regardless of the decision that was made, that would be continuing. And I don't think it's surprising that we are here. I mean, when we went with a 5-year option some years ago, I asked the question to the then fire chief, would we make it through 5 years without adding assets? And he was very frank and said no. So there's no doubt that this day was coming, regardless of whether it happened in budget 2018 or it happened today. There's an expectation that we would be here. I do have a question about the funding, and just near the end of the report, it mentions the provincial portion of funding and the possibility that the province not funding to 50%. So would that overall cost factor in assuming the province was going to cover 50% in those last 2 years? Or is that budget impact or tax impact implying that they wouldn't cover that 50%? And do we know, the chances of that or reasons that they would justify not covering that 50%?
Through you, Mayor Hope. There's obviously a new provincial government, so there are some questions on that part. But as far as how the funding normally goes, when we bring forward a budget for a year, there sometimes is a lag if you have a change of service to the next year. But the assumption would be that the following year we would get the 50%. There's 50% of it at that point in time. The one part about doing it in mid-year like this is that we will resubmit our 2018 budget figures with these new amounts added in, which may actually help us in the 2019 funding piece. So we're hopeful that we may get our 50% share of it in 2019.
Okay, so then that would mean that burden of that $700,000 is not exclusively on municipal property tax assessed dollars. That would be shared with provincial dollars if that went forward.
Well, I believe that figure is our share. Isn't that correct? The 696.
That's the figure the contractor has quoted. So that would be funded. That's the overall figure.
That's so 50% of it would be. That's the whole amount. Okay, so yeah, so I stand corrected. I think that is the entire amount, so that it would be 50%. So,
okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. My questions were similar, and I'm pleased to hear that the budget lag of the request today could be incorporated into the budget next year for Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care funding. But having said that, if we do this, Deputy Chief Case, what work are we going to continue to do in the future so that we don't always have to throw money at this? So are we going to be having the discussions with the Ministry of Health and with our own alliance on how to reduce the offload times, how to best plan strategic responses within our rural community, how to get fire to help more even? Are we going to start looking at alternatives as well in a more proactive sense?
Through you, Mayor Hope. I think it's worth saying, it's a good question. We've always continued to do that. When you look at the community paramedicine program, when you look at the community fire safety program that goes on, we are probably one of the most proactive municipalities in Canada. And we will continue to do that. And as Mr. McClellan alluded to, he's working through the LIN and he's working through the Ministry of Health to try and alleviate any blockage. We meet nearly every week, and these numbers are discussed every week, and the problems are brought forward. And we're in no uncertain terms what's causing the blockages at times. Mr. McClellan is very good at reminding us of that. So we will continue that work, Councillor, and we will continue to ensure we do everything we can to reduce this burden upon the taxpayer.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor Hope.
Thank you. Further comments by Council? I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, to Chris, good job on sitting down and having this conversation. To Don, I want to thank you and Medivh's senior staff who I met with for the meeting, because I think it's important that we deal with the issues that are in front of us today. Second of all, as I heard from your trade union tonight, I'm going to hope that you will, as we contract services from your company will sit with your trade unions so that we can work out collaborative ideas on how do we provide, as Chris indicated, better service to our residents. I think every council person who sits around this table is concerned in making sure that the adequate service of our residents is priority. But we need to do it in a fiscally responsible way, as Councillor Solomon has pointed out, about a return for the investment. So I say to you, Don, first of all, congratulations, I believe, on something. We'll examine it in a little bit to see if our net is going to happen, that the return that we're investing in is going to show dividends. But I think what's most important is that we need collaboration from both the fire and EMS, to yourself, Don, and Medivh, and to your trade union, so that we can make sure that the residents of Chatham-Kent are served well and in a timely fashion in order to get there. There will be circumstances that we can't control. Trust me, I see the emergency room every day from my office. I can tell you how many times I've seen ambulances sitting there waiting for service. This isn't just our problem, it's a community problem. And working collaboratively with the hospitals and others, healthcare providers, I think is going to be an essential part to where we make the savings that we need to, but also provide the adequate service to our residents that I think they deserve and are asking for. So thank you for the presentation tonight. Don, if you would pass a message to your senior management team, I appreciate their work and effort, and to your trade union, I hope you will collaborate with those. No further discussions. I have a motion on the floor, and I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I will turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Let's deal with the next item on the agenda.
Item 16B, amendment to appointment bylaw.
Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 16C, business improvement areas, appointments to boards of management.
Councillor Pincinel, please.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
It's been seconded by Councillor Fluker. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with the Chief Administrative Office. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 17A, property option purchase, Blenheim Business Park.
Councillor Thompson, please.
I'd be happy to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask, Councillor Thompson, please.
I just had one question. I'm not sure who this goes through to. It's tangential to the report. How much space do we have left at the Blenheim Business Park after this option is, say, it's successful?
Once we probably figure out how long the snake's going to occupy and the bobolink bird, I'm still not sure. We'll probably have about, there was a total of 36 acres in that, and then you minus what you've got, so you may have about 30 acres, 26, 20, somewhere around there.
Thank you.
But it depends how long the bobolink bird and the
snake hang out, the eastern fox snake, right? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Solomon? Mayor. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17B, Community Futures Development Corporation, lease of 124 Thames Street, Chatham.
Councillor Solomon, please.
Get these things to work. There we go. Your Worship, I move the recommendation that we lease the space at 124 Thames Street from the Community Futures Development Corporation for our Economic Development Office.
It's been seconded by Councillor Brock-McGregor. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Our next item is Finance, Budget, and Information Technology Services, and let's deal with the first item.
Item 18A, potential sales of WDC rail assets and cash flow loan.
Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by Councillor Foss. Seconder. Councillor Leclerc. Comments, questions? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. My question is I've made a couple of motions over the years to sell the railway, which failed, and I see in this report that the WDC Rail Board is determining how best to sell the railway, whether it be outright to somebody that's going to run trains, which seems kind of impossible, or two, to separate the assets and sell it off and basically like cut bait, more or less. So my question is, Is there any sort of timeline on this? Because this thing bleeds a lot of money really quickly. So is there a timeline on when we would sell it? I know the market's not always good for raw steel, aggregate, et cetera, but we've been hanging on for years, so I think the time is here. And my second question would be, can we get a bottom line estimate of what it costs the municipality monthly to maintain the railway, including the loan, interest, et cetera, just so the public's aware, because we've been hanging on to this thing forever. And clearly, it's not in any shape for a train to go down it. And I'm not an engineer, but if you look at it, it's pretty rough. So, timeline on when to sell the assets, and secondly, monthly cost to maintain the railway, if that's available.
Well,
Thank you.
First of all, I'll ask Don to begin, and then for Steve to jump in.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the plan is to go out with the RFP as it's been laid out this month. We were awaiting council's direction on this particular item. We have reported in closed session to council and gotten direction about the disposition of the assets. In terms of the timing, economic development has been working with finance to value some of the assets, to take stock of them so that we'll be in a position to actually go out to the open market. And as it's laid out in the report, that's exactly the plan we're planning on doing, you know, within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So that's the time frame. When the asset would actually be sold, we'd want to be coming back to council or to, well, to council with some sort of a, if there's offers of purchase or there's offers to, you know, expressions of interest, so that we can get some direction in terms of the sale of the asset, as we would with any of the municipality's assets. So.
Thanks. Just further to that, Don, is the aggregate, like the gravel and the steel rail, are they assets like, say, gold or silver that have a market value that you can just unload, or do you actually have to wait for somebody to come along and say, "Yo, I'm interested"?
So the way the report was written for the benefit of the folks at home, you know, at the 11th hour, if still somebody came up and said, "We'd like to run it as an operational railroad," by all means, we'd consider, you know, land, gravel, steel, all of the assets. But given that we've explored this very thoroughly for several years, we're not expecting that to happen at the 11th hour. So what we're expecting is that people will come forward. If there are people that actually run rail lines, they might very well be interested in a combination of the steel, because it is reusable. It's, as we've reported to council in the past, this is the highest grade or gauge steel there is, and it's sought after as a rail asset. So we'd be looking at people like Metrolinx and other people that are building rail lines to see if they'd be interested in purchasing it. The similar things with the gravel, our folks in Public Works have been looking at the gravel and determining whether that's an asset that they'd want to have. Depending on what we could sell the asset for and what we'd have to go out to the open market and buy the asset, we'd make a recommendation to council as to how that would be disposed of. The plan right now would be to maintain the land in its entirety. We've talked about how valuable that land is, a contiguous corridor that runs through a large extent of Chatham-Kent. We'd never begin to assemble that type of land in a continuous link across all of Chatham-Kent from Chatham to Dresden to Wallaceburg for anywhere close to what we paid for it. It's a really strong asset, and we suggested we could put that in utility corridors, et cetera. So the only time we'd recommend getting rid of the land would be if someone wanted to run it as an operating railroad. Otherwise, we'd be going out and selling the ballast and the rail as separate assets. Some people could take all of it or part of it.
Great. And number 2, monthly cost?
I'll defer to Steve, but the operating cost has been about $70,000 to $75,000 a year. That's to do the maintenance, but.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in 2017, we spent about $128,000. However, with that being said, about $108,000 of that was actually paying the municipality for property taxes, the interest on the loan. So that's where Don gets his number, about $70,000, because we accrue for the loan, we don't actually pay it.
So about $6,000 a month.
Yeah, no, if you're looking at about 128, you're looking at about 10,600.
Oh, I'm reducing the property taxes, because that's
okay. Yeah, if you could reduce the property taxes and you reduce the interest on the loan, you're about $20,000 a year.
Okay, sure. Still lots of money. But by the way it sounds, it probably shouldn't take a long time to sell this. If it's sought after, we may keep the gravel and we may sell this sought after rail, so this shouldn't be a We should have known this thing in a couple of years is what I'm
The
hoping
thing
to
is,
hear.
I think the way we're trying to make sure, from the board's perspective, is not to do it as a liquidation or a fire sale. I mean, this can be a strategic sale. The goal is to achieve our monies back, and that's what we were trying to make sure. First of all, to make sure that we did everything possible to support those businesses that were utilizing it, like Lambton, Lambton, LAC, and also Southwest and those that were utilizing the line prior. What we've come up with is we've tried everything possible to make sure. Well, it's got to the point where you have to identify that you have to liquidate the asset, but do it in a strategic way. So we know that the rail is very important. I don't know if you noticed behind the old Navistar facility in the little corner, everybody's grabbing up the rail that's there and utilizing it somewhere else. So we know there's a value in that. It's about doing it strategically, not as a fire sale approach. As Don indicated, you know, we haven't had inquiries about the gravel that is on there, and companies are looking at it. How much would we sell it for? What it is? But we wanted to make sure that Steve and his team, along with Stuart and Economic Development, had a plan in place that we would be able to maximize our return on our investment to get our monies back out of everything we've invested in.
Yeah, thanks, and fair enough. I know you tried very hard, staff tried very hard to find a company to run the rail, and there's a good reason why CSX walked away, right? It wasn't profitable. So anyway, you tried, so here we are. So now we'll cut bait, hopefully sell it quickly. Thank you.
Any further comments? And seeing none? Oh, Councillor Solomon, were you on this? No. Okay. Ask Council now to consider the recommendation before you. Turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-2.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 18B, tax sale write-offs, June 12th, 2018 tender.
Councillor Vicodern, please.
I'll move it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Robertson. Comments? Seeing none, ask you to consider a recommendation now before you. Turn to the clerk.
Councillor Fluker? All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Next item on the agenda.
Item 18C, BIA audits.
Councillor Herman, please.
I'll move the recommendation.
It's been moved by, seconded by Councillor Oche. Comments, questions? Councillor Wesley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just looking at this, could someone just clarify a little bit for me what a signed management representation letter is?
Through your Mayor Hope, basically each time there's an audit, there's a letter that's signed by management, basically indicating that, you know, all of the various items that are needed to be done in an audit are completed. So we're attesting to controls, we're attesting to, you know, various types of things like that. So we request that for every audit. So an audit of the BIAs would get that same request, that their management would basically signing that they're meeting all of those criteria.
So because the signed management representation letter was not completed, then there was no audit completed?
That's correct.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to, looking at this, is that I see what the recommendation is, because I know going back in time was very difficult for a lot of BIAs because things change. But I think going forward with what you have here, I don't see why you want to impose penalties going forward until we see what the track record is for those groups going forward. I mean, these boards, these BIA boards, are all volunteers. I mean, it's local business people who sit on the BIAs, and they hope that one of the members has some sort of accounting or bookkeeping or some such background in order to do that. And I really think, rather than say out of the gate, now that you're looking at, let's get them to cooperate with us on present day audits, 2017, you know, going forward, wait and see how they respond to that before we start saying, okay, we're going to start holding back your levies. There'll be no easier way to turn off volunteers on a BIA board than to start cutting back their funding until you see what the track record is. I think we're starting with a clean slate here, and I can't agree with imposing the penalty until we see what happens with them going forward. Because the problem was on the audits in the past, you were asking these BIAs to go back in time and say, you know, kind of complete these things. So that's my feel. I can't support and penalize them until we see what kind of track record we get from them.
Through you, Mayor Hope, they fell behind, and that's why they were going back in time. Originally, they were asking for 2012, 2013. They kept falling further and further behind. That's why we're saying that the amounts from 2012 to 2015 are basically immaterial to our financial statements. We've certainly filed our financial statements for all those previous years. So that's the rationale behind eliminating those ones. We haven't had a lot of success in getting the cooperation or completion done. That's why we're suggesting that we start this penalty, for lack of a better term, in 2019, so that we would say that we would get the 2018 financial statements done by May 31st. So we're still allowing them the opportunity to be completed by May 31st, and if they aren't done by then we withhold the second payment of their levy to them.
Just one further question. And so we go back here to 2012. When did we start requiring the BIAs to have audits done?
2012.
Right. And before that, it did not happen. We didn't have them audited. And I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't.
I agree, Mr. Mayor, if I can add something. I agree with what's been said. Just wanted to add that it's always been a requirement under the Municipal Act, so this is not a municipal request or a municipal obligation that we can change. Under the Municipal Act, BIAs are required to have an audit. We had some discussions a few years ago about who paid for that, how would that be done. I think Mike Turner's department has done the best they can to make this as simple as they can for the BIAs, because we certainly understand they're volunteers and it's time consuming for them to submit their receipts. Yeah. I think the challenge going forward is that if we don't have audited financial statements from them, we really don't know how they're utilizing their money, whether it's being spent as they say it's being spent. Yeah. So there's just really starts to become almost a liability question if we don't have knowledge of whether their finances have been checked to determine whether they're spending on what they're budgeted to spend it on.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with, but there was a change back in 2012 because I remember all of the BIAs were up in arms over the new requirement. Now, I'm just trying to think in my memory what that was, whether it was the requirement for the audit. I think it was the requirement that there was a cost associated with the audit.
Mr. Mayor, so it was a requirement of an audit, but it was already in the legislation prior to 2012. Yeah. It just wasn't being enforced.
Okay, but what is the cost? How much does it cost for the audits?
Cost is $1,000 per BIA.
Yeah, that was one of the issues there as well too. So it wasn't as simple as it's in the Municipal Act, because I remember there was some pushback from the BIAs. And I think as far as council is concerned, if you look on this list, nobody's compliant. And so that should be really the story. The fact that there's some resistance to doing this, because you would think there'd be some laggards, but nobody is compliant because they haven't been happy with the way the whole process has worked. So I'm just sharing that with council.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, and I'm glad John jumped in, because we are accountable under the Municipal Act, whether somebody did it in the past or not. And a lot of this stemmed from what was some of the issues that were going on in the Chatham BIA scenario. Just because you didn't do it doesn't make it right. And what we've been trying to do is make sure that we can implement something that says it's got to be done. And if it was, we appreciate all the work that the volunteers are doing and participating in the BIAs, but we've got to make sure that even from a staffing perspective, our staff can issue checks and pay bills, but receipts got to be notarized and ledgered in, and making sure that the monies that we're collecting on behalf of the BIAs have an accountability, and that's under the Municipal Act. That hasn't changed. So I get what you're saying, Councillor Wesley. I'm not going to get into a debate with you about it, but I'm sitting there saying we need people to be in compliance, and to be in compliance to require certain steps. And if you're not in compliance, our recourse as a municipality who is collecting the money need to find a mechanism to stop, or else it will not succeed. If they're asking for assistance I know that Steve and Mike are more than happy to sit down with them and say, if you want us to write checks and do this and pay the bills, we'll be the service provider of providing that mechanism, but we've got to have some balance here. And I know we went through this in 2012, which you remember, and I thought everything was going to get straightened up, and it's still not straightened up, and I'm kind of glad to see some changes coming forward.
If I could, just one final comment, Your Worship. The point I'm making is that when you look at all the good stuff that the BIAs do out there, and you look at, I'll take it as an example of my own community, the beautification downtown walls, that is money that the municipality would otherwise have to spend. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have to do audits. I don't think we should be charging $1,000 when you look at the size of some of these budgets. That's another issue. But I think before, you know, you go and you start saying we're going to hold back your funds, you need to give them that warning and give them a chance to get compliant going from 2017 forward. That's my issue, and I can't support the report. Thank you.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Just wondering, I'm on the Tilbury BIA, the council member on it, and they are contacting the new bookkeeper, and he's unable to assist with the request. Why would they not be contacting the old bookkeeper who actually was around in that time, 2014?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deloitte has reached out to the contact that they were provided through the BIA, and
actually, I know Deloitte has both contacts.
So, but they'd be to the current bookkeeper would be the one that they'd be reaching out to.
Well, he wouldn't have any of the paperwork. We're having a huge problem with the old bookkeeper as far as getting the information we need to get for the ones before this as well. Actually, I'm quite surprised we got the close to the 2014 year end because of the problems we're having. So I would love somebody from Chatham-Kent to give her a call and say, hey, we need this information, we need it now. And I think that would help the Tilbury BIA, because I know they're trying to get all the information, but the requests are on deaf ears.
Okay. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. Are the BIAs aware of this motion coming to us tonight? I guess normally when we have a motion like this, I usually get a call or two regarding that, especially if they have concerns about it. And I guess I just want to know whether they've been consulted as to what's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several of the BIAs are aware. In particular, the Chatham BIA called me late last week and mentioned that they were supportive of all three recommendations. I was in email communication with the Blenheim BIA as well today. So there are several that are aware of the recommendations as presented tonight.
And you don't know whether Dresden was aware or consulted?
I am not aware if Dresden is aware.
I guess with the $1,000 fee to have the audit done, if you look at Dresden's allotment, that's pretty significant, I guess, type thing, So, is there any way that we can sort of work with them to come up with a what am I looking for? I guess a cooperative auditing committee or whatever to do the audit or whatever, so it can sort of alleviate some of those costs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the number that Mike mentioned was about the average for the BIAs. In particular, Dresden is $650 for their audit. Those costs come directly down through Deloitte, through our contract with them. So, we can look at that, but those do come from Deloitte.
Yeah, I support it because the motion, I guess, to the fact that, it's complying with the Municipal Act. And I don't think we can sway from that, but I do think that there's some way we can assist the BIAs in sort of supporting them on that audit process, and also the funding part of it somehow. I agree with Councillor Wesley in the importance that BIAs are to the community, and if we can do something to support them, in a positive way, we should try and do that, I guess. So.
Councillor Herman.
Certainly, I think obviously we're here to understand the accountability of the audit, and certainly that is one that we understand has to go forward. I guess just want to sum up a message that anyone that might be working on with the BIAs in the future, as a counselor, I took it as my role and responsibility if I seen a report that had something to do with the BIA or Aerial Partnership Association or whatever community group that's out there. It's very important to a counselor that they make sure that that group is informed. So that was where I made sure that report was sent to the BIA. So anyone in the future that's on these committees, I recommend, if you haven't already exercised that communication tool, you as a counselor is that communication between municipal administration and that BIA. So, and that going forward, there are definitely some challenges that we see that we would, I believe, if anything that the next council can do, I would suggest that you look at the BIAs. Maybe it's a report that comes back and how they're operating, what they're doing for the communities and the tangibles that go with that. You know the value per dollar that we're getting from these folks that are out there and the volunteerism that is out there for all of our communities. And we know what they're doing. And many people don't know what they're doing, but those that do, it's unmeasurable what they've done. So whether it's dollars, more dollars, or sources, resources, I can only say, as mentioned already, and I'm sorry to repeat it, but it is a repeatable act that we see every day, that they're just doing so much with so little time to do it because these are business owners and our communities, our downtowns wouldn't be what they are today without them. So I ask anyone that's running for the next council, look at it seriously and set a new policy and see that they're being well looked after in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Pinson.
Thank you, Worship. I echo those remarks. I'd like to see number 3 separated out. And the reason for that is if you take away their funds, these groups are going to start folding up. And for all the reasons that were just explained, the good they do for the community, they keep our main streets looking good. I'd just like to see that separated out. Thank you.
Okay. Further comments? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the comments around this table tonight. The BIAs definitely did good work. However, this is not really intended to be a punitive measure. This is waiving a poor history, and I don't mean that to denigrate the work of the BIAs. It's not that they have a poor history; they've got a tremendous history, but there's a poor history in terms of the audit. This item, I'm really surprised we're having all this dialogue right now because this item came, I think, as Councillor Herman indicated, if she saw something that happened in a committee report, she spoke to the BIAs ahead of time, and all of this work was done in committee. It was done during the audit committee, and it was minuted back to this council through committee report. And so all that's really happening now is it's being formalized by way of recommendation directly from the approved report that was minuted back to this council. It's not intended to be punitive in terms of ripping funds away from the BIAs. I think more so it's intended to ensure that they have compliance moving forward to the legislation, and provided that they're compliant, everyone receives their money. And then additionally, I guess my last question would be, suppose that it wasn't May 30th, suppose that a BIA was not compliant May 31st, and by June 15th they were compliant, would they receive their funds? Of course they would receive their funds. And so there's not really a punitive measure here. It's just to ensure and provide this council the assurance that they're being compliant to the legislation, that we don't possess the liability to not allow them to be unaccountable to the legislation. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I'm going to ask council to consider.
I want to separate number 3 out of there, Your Worship.
So we'll do so. Meredith, 1 and 2 together, 3 separated. I'd ask council now to consider 1 and 2. Turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 3. ask council to consider. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-5.
Our next item on the agenda.
Item 18D, offer to purchase 105 and 119 Arnold Street, Wallaceburg.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the recommendation in the report.
Seconder. Councillor Carmen McGregor. Any comments or questions? Councillor Oche.
Not a comment, just I should have declared conflict with this. I do some work for the company. Thank you.
This guy. Noted conflict. Seeing no comments or questions, I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 18E, offer to purchase 88 Metcalf Street, Shrewsbury.
Councillor Harmon, please.
So move.
Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I will now turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Our next item is infrastructure and engineering services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 19A, gravel road surface aggregate quality.
Councillor Leclerc.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Councillor Leclerc, seconded by Councillor Robertson. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. I mean, I get to do it the traditional way. All those in favor, raise their hand. All those opposed?
No, she's right. It's only an information.
It's only an information report. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, it's carried. Next item.
Item 19B, cooperative furniture purchase contract.
Councillor Herman, please.
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Vergooderen. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask you now, Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you, I was just wondering how much money we're actually talking here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That totally depends on the number of projects that we're going to get into over the next 5 years. We're talking 5-year contracts. So let's say we go ahead with certain renovations within the Civic Center. If it's a substantial renovation, that would, we're talking substantial amount of money. Otherwise, it's going to be smaller projects as the departments are asking for those.
Through you, Mayor Hope, as I said before, Mr. Skodak, very difficult to vote on things where you don't know what the dollar figure is. I understand what you're saying, but it could be tens of thousands, could be hundreds of thousands. It's difficult.
Correct, but any purchases will be any purchases by the different departments will have to still go through the purchasing policy, and the reports will still have to go to the appropriate people for the approvals. This is just to have somebody on board to go to.
Mayor Hope, if I could add, this is money that we would have spent anyway with council approval. So it's setting up the contract, a competitive contract, one time for 5 years rather than subsequent smaller contracts.
I actually like the idea for a simple fact. Everybody's not buying a different piece of furniture from a different piece of somebody who you can't connect. Just ask my staff. They have a bunch of connected furniture. It's like a puzzle putting together some of the furniture. That may help, Councillor Van Dam.
It does, Mayor Hope, and I agree with you. It is nice to have those efficiencies built in, and I like the component where, you know, we mirror with the City of London, but unfortunately we're not mirroring with a local company either. And to that, Mr. Skodak, maybe to go back to my original point, what would be a big project that you're eyeing right now for furniture?
Okay, well, let's assume we want to renovate the Civic Center, okay? And you saw a presentation from us, from Mr. Kelly, about a year ago, $14 million project. Part of that was probably over more than $500,000, $800,000 of furniture purchases. Furniture, dividers, any type of furnishings. Depending on what we choose.
Any further comments? Councilor Robertson?
I'm very comfortable with this process. It's a compliant process to the world I live in under the broader public sector procurement directive. It's really setting up a vendor of record. So to Councilor Van Dam's question, well, how much are we going to spend? Well, that all still needs to run through the purchasing policy, as Mr. Skodak highlighted, and that's then governed by the delegation of spend authority within the municipality. And if it reaches a certain level, it absolutely has to come back to this council's table for approval. This is merely setting up a vendor of record for future purchasing. I think it's an excellent process. It's probably saving us money in the long run, and it's compliant to our procurement policy. Thank you.
No further comments. I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-2.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 19C, motion by Councillor Wesley regarding obsolete rail crossings.
Councilor Wesley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Chatham-Kent begin the process of removing obsolete rail crossings, signage, and begin repaving, repairing those crossings for the benefit of drivers and school bus operators, with staff to report back to council for the meeting on August 13th, 2018.
Seconded, Councilor Carmen McGregor. Councilor Wesley, you have the floor.
Be very brief. I've had some discussions with Mr. Kelly. They've already started removing some of the signage, and as I indicated to him, the other concern I had is really removing some of the rails out of the roads and repaving those spots over, because there are some rail crossings that are horrendous to drive over. And to give you an example, go through the Wallsburg industrial area, Baseline Road or Gillard Street, and I dare you to try to go across any of those crossings at 30 kilometers or more, because you'll be lucky if you make it. But anyways, it is part of what he is doing on an ongoing basis. I'm happy that it's happening going forward. Thank you.
Further comments? And seeing none, I would ask council to consider the notice motion before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Our next item on the agenda.
Motion 19D, motion by Councillor Oche regarding purchase of the old Kent County Jail.
Councillor Oche, please.
Thank you. Your Worship, sorry. Bringing forward the motion that administration bring back a detailed report with regards to purchasing of the old Kent County Jail and Courthouse, including costs of to purchase the old facility. See if we could fit the rest of the Chatham-Kent staff that are scattered in buildings across Chatham into this one facility. The cost of fixing up the facility for Chatham-Kent staff, to see what we could expect if we sold the buildings the staff are currently in, and 5, keeping a place for the old Kent County law books if possible. And if I could just add to have the reports back by October 1st.
Need a seconder to this? Councillor Bondi. Councillor Oche, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you. I brought this up. Obviously, I'd like to save the county building and the jail as well. But I honestly cannot say that I know how many staff could fit into it. But it is a building that I believe would be nice to keep around for Chatham-Kent, for Kent County itself, which we were before. I know the law books, I've been told by a lawyer that most of the very important books were taken out already. So the most important thing to me, is the building itself. And I hear all the time that we have people spread out all throughout Chatham-Kent and throughout Chatham that it'd be nice to get into the building. I know we wanted to get them all into here, and that's not possible. So I'm hoping that we can do it this way. I know, or I've heard, I don't know positively if the province really did buy the courthouse and the jail for $1 from Kent County at the time. And I'm not sure what they're asking for it now, if they would be willing to sell it back to us for the same price or not. But I would like to see a report on this to see if we could do anything with it ourselves. Thank you.
Yeah. Further comments? Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move an amendment. So I guess it might be paragraph 6. If I get a seconder, and I'll speak to it, to add, the wording would be option of private sector purchasing.
Okay.
So if I get a seconder, I'll speak to that.
Seconder, Councillor Victorian.
Go ahead.
Councillor Solomon.
Okay. I mean, I don't mind getting a report from administration on some of these issues. I don't know that we should be in the business of owning the building and trying to renovate it. I know both those buildings incredibly well. One of them I don't think you'd want to own under any circumstances. I don't think you'd want to put staff in there. And that's not the jail. That's the one you probably would want to keep. But it might be better, not to put staff in there. But, I was waiting for someone to raise that. But the other, really, it may be an idea for private sector who may be interested in purchasing it and renovating it. You'll recall that something similar happened with the Armory, and it was going to be, we were offered to purchase it, and we went through a process, and now it's a lively, active center used for receptions on one part and offices on another. But that's because the private sector got involved, not government, other than assisting so the private sector could have it. So I'd like to at least have that put in there if this motion passes. And I should also ask, where are we on all this? Do we have notice that it's being sold? I mean, you just hear rumors, but we haven't had a report in a long time.
So we've received notice that it's been for sale. Will we get it for $1? No, because a few things have changed. There'll be a market value, but a private sector will pay the same price as what we're going to end up paying for it at the end of the day.
But is the process the same as it's been in the past, where the province has to offer it first to the municipality?
Yes. Bruce, you want to continue?
So, actually, about 3 years ago, almost to the day, is when they gave notice that the property was going to be surplused. Just to keep in touch with them at the time, based on the direction that municipality do everything to ensure that it's preserved as a cultural heritage property, we did submit what was called an expression of interest when they circulated to other government sectors. And we explored the options, and they suggested it's going to be at least 2 years before they do all their due diligence work on the property. There's quite a bit to do on that property. So, and that it would have to be sold at fair market value, whether it was a direct sale to a government entity. And with that came a number of restrictions for the end use, meaning it had to be used as a public use. The municipality would have to hold it for a number of years before it could possibly be sold. So it was best to let it go to the open market process. And I can tell you, I just got a call at 4:30 today from CBRE, is going to be their listing realtor, that it will be listed here in the very near future. So honestly, if the municipality, they have to bid on this when it gets listed with other private sector entities. It will also They will have a 30-day hold where they will not accept any offers, just to give everybody the opportunity to make a fair offer, but that's where they're at in the process.
Does that help, Councilor Solomon?
Well, for information purposes, it helps. I knew that myself, but I mean, there's people listening in TV land who'd like to know, and there's others probably in this room who'd like to know. So I still want to have in this motion the option for the private sector to purchase, not us necessarily.
Yeah.
The market value of the old county building, probably have to give me money to take that. But in any event, the only other question I have, Your Worship, while Mr. McAllister's up there, is has there been a heritage designation on the, at least on the old jail and courthouse, as opposed to the 1950s building?
Through Your Worship, I meant to mention that through their environmental assessment process, they acknowledge that the property does have provincially significant cultural heritage aspects, and that it is designated locally by the municipality through a bylaw. But as part of the sale, the new landowner will be subject to actually an easement with the Ontario Heritage Trust, which gives it even a further protection down the road for any property owner.
I got involved in the first place, Your Worship, years ago for that purpose, to protect the building from being demolished. That is the jail and courthouse. The 1950s building, have fun with it, whoever wants to buy it. But
the Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 6 items down there. Councillor Solomon added the one of the option of private sector purchasing. Of the 6, that's the only one I can support. Quite frankly, I don't think Chatham-Kent needs another old building that's going to take millions in renovations to make it into something. I think the better course of action is to wait and see if a private sector developer buys the building and makes good use of it, and then we go from there. But I simply can't support. We got too many of our own buildings now that we got to put money into. We got to renovate and bring up the code. We don't need another one. Thank you.
Councillor Canna, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. I guess 3 years ago when it was put up in the market, I'm guessing the administration would have went through the process of looking at the building and determining what we thought we should do with it. Was there some sort of internal business case done at that point, or is it all just discussion to say, in the end, we concluded we weren't interested in buying it from the province? So what was the thought process that went through there?
At the time, sorry, through Your Worship, we didn't have any real direction from council to investigate it any further, but we did reach out because we wanted to ensure that it was protected from a cultural standpoint. But there were several of us from administration. I know I went through the building on a couple occasions. I know Thomas went through. There was a few other staff members that went through at least once or twice. With some other interested individuals in town as well. They wanted to see the condition of the building. There's certainly, all I can say, there's a lot of work to do in there. It's been used as a training facility for the OPP on the one side, and certainly the jail at the time had a lot of mold residue. I understand that one of the things was after that they shut it down to do mold removal. But they've been maintaining the building with some modest improvements, some roofing improvements since that time, but not a lot of significant investment. They're really getting it to the point where they can list it for sale. And I just wanted to also confirm that they are selling it as one package, both buildings, because they are potentially separate properties, but there's also the parking lot across the road that will be part of the sale as well, that backs on really to the dog park there.
So to produce this report, you would have done a lot of the work already to be able to answer those questions?
All we did was a visual.
Visual, okay. So there would be a fair amount of work to doing this, or?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. There would be a tremendous amount of work to do this report. And of particular interest for me is I really would require further clarification on item 3. So item 3, the cost to fix would be, clarification is, do you want a high-level estimate, order of magnitude? Do you want a detailed architectural type study? Do you want us to consider also the heritage value? I mean, there's a significant cost if you want to involve an architect. I'm going to guess it's going to be between $30,000 to $50,000. And as Bruce said, we went through the building and we didn't want to touch it at all. It was in very rough shape, and this would be a major renovation. So we would have to bring it up to code. We've done 3 studies now in the last year and a half, and every one of them, the business case is not panned out when you look at all of the costs. So I would sincerely ask for additional clarification on number 3. What are you looking for? So if I take it to the full extent, this could be a 2 to 3 month exercise, dollar value $40,000 to $50,000 if you want an accurate cost.
Well, let us wait till we see whether this passes before we get into specifics. I'm not going to have a bunch of motions. Councillor O'Shea.
I won't get right into actual details, but I received an email today from someone regarding the architecture, and they said the heritage architects usually considerable lower estimates than regular architects and builders. I'm not sure if you've dealt with any. I'm not trying to put you down. I honestly don't know if you've ever dealt
Thank you. We've also have experience in that, and you get advice, but it's not advice that you can go to press with. You need a stamped engineer or an architect to really give you something of substance. They give you advice. It is less expensive, but it's not something that we can, with confidence, tell council, this is what it's going to cost. It's a lot less expensive, and to get the right advice, I would highly recommend an architect in this case.
To your worship. So a heritage architect isn't an architect that can stamp anything. Is that what you're
Thank you. It all depends. It all depends who you get, and but we have not had the best of experiences in other cases. They give you a very high-level assessment, and again, that's why I was asking, what are you looking for in number 3? Just high level, or are you looking for real costs? That would be important for us to know. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'm kind of thinking maybe Councillor Sullivan's amendment has been answered if they're going to actively try and sell it on the open market. That's just a comment. My question is about the heritage designation. I realize nobody probably wants to touch this thing, but just, out of curiosity, because it is clearly a historical monument within the city, Bruce, I wasn't too sure what you meant as far as the heritage designation. So I'll just kind of clarify my question. The Chatham Heritage Committee, has it been allowed to designate an Ontario-owned, similarly Rondeau Park? We tried that once, that didn't work. Because the city doesn't, is it considered part of the municipality? My question is, has it been designated heritage by the committee here, thus preventing a demolition permit being certified to, or granted to whoever purchases it?
Yeah, I don't know the whole history behind that bylaw, but it goes back to the city of Chatham days when it was originally designated. So I'd have to see what the legislation said at the time, but that bylaw hasn't changed in years. It was designated by the local committee. What I was suggesting is the province has also acknowledged through their work that it's provincially significant, which gives it a higher level of
because the demolition, which we've dealt with a couple of times recently, would be a big concern for whoever buys it, and for the community, because it is so historically important. Mind you, it looks like, it's a lot of work involved, but I guess we're not clear on whether or not demolition would be part of a sale. We just don't know the answer to that quite yet.
Oh, so as part of the sale?
Oh, no, sorry, no. I didn't mean that. Okay. I get what you're saying, but as far as the preservation of the building, we don't know clearly if that is in law. That's a maybe.
What I was advised is when the building will be sold, one of the conditions will be that it will actually have a heritage easement now with the Ontario Heritage Trust, which is now actually registered on title with an agreement, which is even a higher level of heritage protection than you would have with the designation bylaw.
Oh, okay, that clarifies. Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Caniff.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify Thomas, you mentioned that it was going to take 2 to 3 months to do that study, and it's going to go up for sale in the next week, and they'll have a 30-day item on it. So we probably wouldn't have the report back to actually act on anything. It would be already sold at that point if there was a private individuals are going to buy it. Okay, so that, do
You're-
we agree with that timeline then?
You're absolutely correct, Councillor Caniff.
Okay, all right. Helps answer my question then, thanks.
I'm going to call the question. 1 to 5. You have a notice of motion before you. Ask council to consider 1 to 5. To the clerk. Sorry.
Don't we vote on the
Oh,
amendment before
sorry.
we vote on the
Yeah, I
motion?
should have put the amendment up first.
Okay.
Can you clear those, Meredith? Sorry.
Point of order, Mayor. Point of order. I believe Bruce said that if we were to buy this, the public can't buy it from us anyways for however many years. So does 6 even need to really be on there?
6 is a private sale, so that has nothing to do with us.
Well,
Option for private sector to purchase.
Why would you put private sector on there? They
did.
can buy it without coming to us anyway.
I didn't make the motion. Councillor Solomon asked that it be an item number 6 to your motion. I agreed. It was seconded. Now we'll vote on it. Ask council to consider option number 6. Option for private sector. Turn to the clerk. What are we waiting for?
All votes are in. Motion passes 12 to 6.
And we'll deal with 1 to 5. Ask council to consider.
Mayor Hope, could we vote on 5 separately?
The old law books are not relevant. Do you want to hear a story about the law books?
No, you know what? I'm happy. I'll just vote
Okay,
against the whole
thank
damn
you.
thing.
I can give you a story about the law books if you'd like them. I would ask council to consider the 5 recommendations now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion fails 2 to 16.
Our next item on the agenda, please.
Item 19E, school zone speed limits and community safety zones, Phase 1.
Councillor Fluker, please.
Very pleased to move the recommendations that are in that report, Your
Thank
Worship.
you. Seconder, Councillor Carmen McGregor. Comments, questions? Councillor Foss.
Just have one question. I looked at, there's some areas that aren't mentioned, and do I understand this correctly, that those areas will be assessed at a later time?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. That's the intent, to continue additional phases and look at the remaining schools.
Okay, no, that's good. I just didn't want to be left out on that, I guess, so, thanks.
Councillor Carmen McGregor.
First off, I would, if I get you cold, Dawn. First off, I'd like to thank Thomas and his department for this report and for the detail of this report. And I know this comes from my motion earlier last year when we had the issue with the crosswalk within the community of Wallaceburg and for the school crossing. So I know there are some changes from my original motion, and through talking to Thomas about moving forward with this, it very much makes sense. So I very much appreciate the work and the time and effort that has gone in to look at all these different school zones, and that I'm very happy with the recommendations that are coming to council tonight.
So it's, any further comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18 to 0.
Next item. Closed session reports. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I'd like to move the closed session report of Monday, July 16th. Not present at the meeting was Councillor Solomon. Council directed administration on proposed disposition of land by the municipality or local board with regard to land lease Elm Street, Bothwell, Section 2392C of the Municipal Act. Personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, with regard to appointments for the 2018 to 2022 Compliance Audit Committee, Section 2392B of the Municipal Act. A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on to or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with regard to fiber network expansion and tech savvy, Section 2392F and K of the Municipal Act. Council received information on advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to gravel road service aggregate quality, Section 2392F Municipal Act. And the following item was postponed to a future meeting. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, with regard to a municipal employee, Section 2392B of the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Comments, questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. And I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Pincinel.
Councillor Pincinel, please. Thank you.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with approval of communicated items. So moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Any items of interest? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Opposed? Carried. Non-agenda business items. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. Quite some time ago, we heard about the Pinty's Curling Championship that was to be come to the community this fall, but we haven't heard anything in, I don't know, maybe 5 months or more. For our next meeting, could we've had a nice update on one economic generator here, which is the International Plowing Match, but this was proposed to be quite an economic generator too. So it would be nice to sort of know what's, as we now head into August and September's around the corner, it'd be nice to have an update on that. Not just a quick thing now at the end of this meeting, but as a report on our next agenda.
So noted.
Thank you.
Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I just had a quick question. I was at the splash pad this weekend in Kingston Park, which is a good place to be with those heat warnings. And the splash pad was off for a few hours, for about through, I think, 3-ish hours. And there's no number posted there for anyone to call. Fortunately, small town, you know, happened to be someone there who knew somebody, play a little phone tag, and we did get someone from maintenance there and got it restarted. But that was sort of a lucky happenstance. And just wondering if there's a way we can put up an appropriate contact number other than the regular hours contact number. So in that type of event, you know, people there can reach out, let us know it's not working, and get it restarted.
So noted.
Or yeah, give me a key.
So noted. Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Yes, I would just like to mention if you're out this weekend, we do have another BIA Farmers Market in town, and it is in conjunction with Wally Fest, which is a really great day for kids, and it's all centered around family and children's activities in the downtown core. So if you're out and about and you have children or grandchildren, come on over to Wallaceburg.
Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Worship. Civic Day holiday weekend, Ridgetown's got their East Kent Vintage Tractor Show. Let's come out and visit that. It's always a good show.
Councillor Trevor Thompson.
Just further to Councillor McGregor's comment in regards to the after-hours sign, if we could potentially look at putting that on washrooms as well. There's a lot of complaints. Sometimes the locks fail and either don't lock or lock early. There's sometimes damages. I know out in Erie, we've had some concerns about sand clogging things up. And at our most recent EPA meeting, that very issue came up. Nobody knew who to get in touch with in not so much an emergency situation, but an after-hours situation as far as maintenance is concerned.
So noted. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson just reminded me, I had somebody come and visit me today, and they were wondering if the washrooms at the cemetery somehow could be open during the day for the people that, because apparently some people attend the cemetery daily to tend to the flowers, and I said, well, I have no clue, but I don't know if there's staff that could do that. Apparently there's a washroom at the mausoleum. I don't know.
Your concern has been raised, and I'm sure you'll get a response coming back to you by email.
So noted. Thank you.
So noted. Councillor Herman.
This weekend, folks, is the Blenheim Cherry Fest. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday is the midway, and it's the shopping, and it's downtown fun. I do highly recommend that on Saturday, the Cherry Pit Spit Contest for all of you great spitters out there. I would suggest you come at 12:30 on Saturday to Cherry Central, is right between the bank and the Municipal Hall. And what they're doing this year, it's going to be the Guinness World Book of Records, is they're trying to get the most spitters to get into that book. So I highly recommend all of you coming. 12:30, be there. I believe it might be a little bit about 1 o'clock that event happens. So just get there early. If you want the front line spitting, go for it. Look forward to seeing any of you and all of you that were there, could be there.
I've actually won the first place award a few times, but unfortunately I won't be there this year because I have a milestone in my own personal life. I was born in '59 and I turned 59, so there was going to be a personal weekend. Council Wesley.
Well, after hearing that story about spitting, I couldn't help but resist but get in on something. Since our next meeting is August 13th, August 13th, just want to mention that the 30th annual Wallsburg Antique Motorboat Outing is coming to Wallsburg on August 10th, the 11th, and 12th. It's going to be bigger and better than it's ever been. I invite everybody to come out, invite the community to come out, come by car, come by boat, come by bike, come by plane, just don't come by rail. Thank you.
And if you go by boat, you can stop in and have a refreshment while you finish your tour in the Wallsburg at Councillor Wesley's house.
That's right, you can.
Councillor Leclerc.
I'd like to report that we had a fantastic bass tournament this past weekend. Lots of fish was caught. In the meantime, there was an advertorial that came out, a fishing magazine that goes out throughout North America. Mitchell's Bay was recommended #1 and #4 in best bass and all around best fishing. So we have a gem here, and I'd like to just say that out loud now, is we're in transition here where the Marine Park is, there's something that needs to happen there, and I would support, staff here, pushing staff a little bit. We have an asset here that could create a lot of economic development and not a lot of work. So I just want to say we're #1 in North America. We have an asset that's, you may have to vote on this fall or next term, I'm not sure, but just remember us in Mitchell's Bay. Thank you.
Oh, you forgot to mention this weekend.
And this weekend is, I'm going to Hawaii.
Antique show. Antiques is this week.
Bob Azumi's fishing tournament this weekend. It's another fantastic bass tournament.
Seeing no further comments, I'm going to move to reading of the bylaws. Any reading of the bylaws, first and second reading, so moved by Councillor Pinsino, seconded by Councillor Herman. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Shall council go into committee? Third and final reading, so moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Oche. All those in favor? Opposed to any, and it's carried. Resolution of council. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, August 13th, 2018, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor and seconded by Councillor Pinsino. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried, and good night.